The Massacre at Sand Creek. Narrative Voices. By Bruce Cutler. Part 1. The Wolves of Heaven, August 14, 1911. 5. The Letters of Silas Soule, November 12, 1861 November 15, 1862. 17. The Wolves of Heaven, Morning, August 15, 1911. 31. The Letters of Silas Soule, April 1, 1863. 41. Part 2. The Wolves of Heaven, Afternoon, August 15, 1911. 53. The Letters of Silas Soule, October 7, 1863 August 29, 1864. 65. The Wolves of Heaven, Morning, August 16, 1911. 75. The Letters of Silas Soule, October 9, 1864. Part 3. The Attack, November 29, 1864. 93. The Letters of Silas Soule, February 12, 1865 April 15, 1865. 113. The Wolves of Heaven, Afternoon, August 16, 1911. 121. Part 4. Clipping from the Rocky Mountain News, April 27, 1865. 129. An interview with Colonel John Milton Chivington, November 30, 1868. 133. The Wolves of Heaven, Morning, August 17, 1911. 147. An interview with Colonel John Milton Chivington, continued, November 31, 1868. 157. The Wolves of Heaven, Afternoon, August 17, 1911. 175. Part 5. The Wolves of Heaven, August 18, 1911. 193. The Old Gentleman on the Train, June 8, 1871. 211. The Wolves of Heaven, August 19, 1911. 235. Preface. On November 29, 1864, in the last weeks of the Civil War, a force of territorial militia under the command of a politically ambitious former Methodist minister, Col. John Milton Chivington, attacked a sleeping camp of Cheyennes along Sand Creek in the southeast part of the Colorado Territory. John Evans, the governor of the territory, had previously authorized the organization of this militia for defense against a Confederate invasion, but the invasion never came. However, in the interim, there had been several bloody clashes between Cheyennes and newly arrived white settlers. Evans had advocated a policy of separating hostile and friendly tribal units and of protecting the latter in certain specified enclaves. Now, fears generated by the clashes caused him to decide that most of the Plains Indian tribes should be pursued as enemies of the country. He issued a proclamation to this effect without bothering to inform the tribes of his decision, and he dramatized the situation by appearing armed in public, saying that it was the duty of every man to defend himself at all times. Behind Evans and his policies loomed the figure of his friend, Chivington. Chivington was a candidate for Congress, thirsting to regain the military glory he had won at a battle against Confederate forces earlier in the war. He proclaimed that Indians would kill women and children, he damned any man in sympathy with Indians, and he now believed it right and honorable to use any means under God's heaven to kill them. His militia were 100-daysers, so called for the short period of their enlistment. Many of them were unemployed miners and drifters. They saw an attack on Indians, any Indians, as a popular move in a war they knew would soon end. Black Kettle was a peace chief of the Cheyennes. He believed his camp at Sand Creek was a safe enclave, and he had gathered around him a group of non-belligerents. It was against them that Chivington launched a surprise attack at dawn. What ensued was genocide. Hundreds of Cheyennes and Arapahoes were massacred, 2/3 of whom were women and children. John Smith, a well-known mountain man and trapper who was visiting the camp at the time of the raid, had his life spared, but his half-Cheyenne son was killed. Smith was forced to watch as the body was dragged around the camp behind the horses of Chivington's men. Shortly before the attack, while on his way to Sand Creek at the head of his militia, Chivington happened to pass by Fort Leon and made an unexpected request for additional troops of the 1st Colorado Regiment stationed there. These regular troops had actually been charged with keeping order between Indians and whites, and they had recently arranged for a truce with the Plains tribes. After lengthy discussion, and vigorous dissent by some of the 1st Colorado officers, Chivington obtained agreement from the Fort Command for additional troops. Several officers continued to feel that the projected raid would be murder, pure and simple. One of them was Captain Silas Soule, a veteran of the border warfare between abolitionists and pro-slavery forces in Kansas in the years prior to the Civil War. At the moment of the attack, when Soule realized the full impact of Chivington's purpose, he refused to order his men to fire. From that moment, Soule earned Chivington's enmity. Controversy over Sand Creek arose quickly. Many saw that Chivington's assault had compromised the good faith efforts of the regular army to maintain order with the Cheyennes and other Plains tribes. The controversy generated several congressional inquiries. Chivington maintained the rightness of his conduct. Soule was the first to testify against him, and his testimony, along with that of others, remained firm. Each of the inquiries found that Chivington had ordered an unprovoked assault, but in the end, no punishment could be meted out to him because it was discovered that his commission had actually expired before he had undertaken the raid. In this climate of legal and administrative chaos, the Civil War ended. Within a few days came the assassination of President Lincoln, and a few days after that, Soule himself became the target of an assassin and was shot and killed. The massacre at Sand Creek, like the My Lai massacre in our time, was an atrocity committed during a period of exculling hostilities between indigenous peoples and their European invaders. Violence worsened in the aftermath of Sand Creek, and it became more and more common among white Americans to believe that their government's Indian policy should reflect a ruthlessness based on the assumption that Indians not only would, but must, disappear altogether. Politicians felt increasingly free to assert that Indians were not an improvable breed. The destiny of American Indians in such a climate of opinion inexorably turned toward racial extermination. In the years since, the Cheyennes struggle to maintain themselves, their language, their religion, and their identity as a people has been extremely difficult. Often it has been a losing struggle. But during our century, there has developed a tidal wave of demand for the rights of subject peoples that has swept the continents of the world, including our own, stirring change. What was a minority view of the worth, dignity, and rights of American Indians at the time of Silas Soule and Black Kettle has become more representative of a majority view today. It is a Cheyenne view of the world that is reflected in the Massacre sections of this narrative. The Massacre has been one of the ancient threads that has held the Cheyenne people together. As you read about Ekamana, Frank Little Wolf, and the Massacre ceremony itself, you will encounter short groups of lines on a page, sometimes even one-line pages. Take them as suggestions of the enduring differences between the Cheyenne language and our own. The World of 11. Ekamana and Frank Little Wolf both cries out for and asserts the authenticity of its vision through my attempt to render the Cheyenne language. I am indebted to many people who have been helpful to me since that day in 1959 when I decided to start work on this project, not least to the anthropologist Carl Schlesier, whose work in reconstructing the content of the Massacre ceremony, which had its last known reenactment in Montana in August of 1911, is reflected here in the title of the Massacre sections. And my special thanks to James Lee Burke, who believed in this book. Bruce Cutler. 3. 1. 5. The Wolves of Heaven. Northern Cheyenne Reservation, Montana. August 14, 1911. What really belongs to anybody, except what they have already lived. What has anybody to live for, except what they are not yet living? Cesare Pavese. 7. They're camped in short grass country, but it isn't theirs. In a place that they've been given, if given is what you can't say no to. A place that they would ride through to get to another place, if the whites would let them. To a place where sky and earth connect, where the spirit world can bless and guide the living. Where all can know the dead when living, and the living when they're dead. In peace. 8. Instead, they dig. The man and woman take turns, under a stone-colored sky. Not a tree, not a thing that moves except for the glint of the mattock, rising, falling. There's a bundle at their feet. It's wrapped in grasses and a bolt of flannel, tied with thongs. It has come to her from Oklahoma from a cousin of a cousin who came on the thing it holds. In a white man's store of hand-me-downs. The cousin had known at once, wedged as it was in a corner in back of shoes and purses where it lived on, forgotten. It was tanned and supple and bordered with a casing stitched in red, with a French silk drawstring run inside to close it. No need for a second look, she'd known. How could the white man know? What he felt he let pass through his heart. It left him without memory, in ignorance that spared him from the gall of shame. 9. She thinks, you can ask of Owl who are the most on earth, the living or the dead. And Owl will say the dead. And there you are, truth is told on you, say as you will, since when is it success for anyone to die? For saying that you betray a heart that doubts the wonder of this world. This place where fear should never light its fire. This place of transformations. Deathlessness. Miracle. 10. So she asks nothing. This thing that is now a bauble has passed from hand to hand, relative to relative, has made its way as a stray dog would across the plains, until it found her. Cradled by hands, by palms, by fingers, it took on life, came out of its past like a ghost, branded with the name of the man who once had worked it into shape, Squires, SCRK, 1864. And it was truly a child of its maker. So cunning, so awless it could stay on a shelf or in back of a drawer for years unless you took it carefully in hand, felt its surface, traced its contours down to the hard unyielding areola and nipple at the bottom. Then you would have known. 11. The cousins, they had known. And now the woman has it, this piece, this bit of pelt that never was the pouch it posed as, that never served a purpose other than to fit a message to your hand, terrible phylactery of the faith that holds an Indian less than a living soul. Tit bag, soldiers called it. It has come along with wizened fingers, scalp locks, scrotum stretched into humidors, the file of body parts that slipped away in pockets, kit bags, trunks, leaving the plains for courthouse squares, banquet halls, museums. And then into the long dark night of dresser drawers, attic trunks. Waiting. Continuing to be. Biding the time until their time would come again. 12. Today, she's vowed she'll give it burial. She, the woman, Ekamana, granddaughter of Crow woman that died in the white man's trap at Sandy Creek. She, at work with her husband, Frank Little Wolf. The two of them, pledgers for the Massacre. But first they must dig a narrow house for the 1,000th part of one of them, their people, Sistas. 13. Deep enough. Frank Little Wolf lays down his tools. He spits on his hands, then hers. They lay the bundle in the little deep earth lodge, filling it back up along with prayers and pledges and scantlings of tobacco. She prays that every bone and every piece of skin and every hair of all their people will have a narrow house like this someday. 14. For the story is there wasn't even half of Crow woman left to bury when they'd found her after Sandy Creek. Story that was repeated, day after week after year as the whites had come at them, pushed them onto reservations. They'd broken out, tried to trek to Canada, but troops had forced them back. A flock of wild geese, that straggled from marsh to river, starting up, beaten down, starting up again. their broken bodies blanketing the landscape. 15. Here is the little grave. The copper-colored clods, pressed down and banked. Less than a body length, only a few spans wide, it seems just the slightest catch of breath in the gritty thorax of plains and sky. Spirit wind, breath sent out from the spirit world, bring blessing to this place and to this people. She feels the words pass through her soul, enter the air like fledgling eagles. Sharp-eyed. Craving. Catch as catch can. 16. Prayers, to a stone-colored sky. 17. The Letters of Silas' Soul. November 12, 1861. November 15, 1862. There is properly no history, only biography. R. W. Emerson. 19. Raton, New Mexico Territory. November 12, 1861. Dearest Mother. You see, I made it, Pat. Major Kit Carson sends you greetings and grateful thanks for festive board, back when Father was still alive. He asks me, do I think if I could rescue one more Dr. Doy from the Rebs, or Mexicans, or Injuns? How's that for my reputation coming out ahead of me? And so much the better, I am finally out of Kansas and on the Taos Trail. In short, today I'm made lieutenant in Kit's own company. Since the gold rush up in Colorado, ores are on everybody's mind out here, the mountains gleam with veins of quartz. But the light mellows them with lavenders and blues and purples, plus something you'd say is like the sea. 20. That deep water green off the coast of our beloved Maine. Though here, the green's most likely malachite. I guess your boy won't get rich soon, he'll have to dog for grub, instead of dig for gold. Did Annie buy a one-way ticket back to Maine? Wouldn't you know that sis would funk at chills and fever and 114 in the shade. But that's the scratch that cures the Kansas itch. Give her my love. And a brotherly devoir to WLG, if he's still alive and on the Union side. Your devoted S.I. 21. November 28, 1861. 2. Mr. Walter Whitman, C/O Thayer. Eldridge, Hinton, etc. Dear Walt. When you think you've seen all the world and you want to get up another book, first come out second class as far as Kansas. Then head on down the Taos Trail. But I don't suppose you'd want to leave your palmy life at Pfaff's Cafe and literary loafing just to watch the buzzards circling overhead and hear them bidding for your brains. Gravely speaking, that's how it is here now for the lighter side. I haven't told my mother, but I spent the summer of '60 looking for Golconda, up in Colorado. What I found was Geneva Gulch. The eve of my arrival we went bare knuckles and one of the boys had his eye displaced about a half a knuckle out of socket, whereupon we rechristened it as Gouge Eye Gulch. It's one rough spot to slosh a placer pen or feed a rackety quartz mill, just for grub. Talk about fatigue. After a month high in the Rockies where nothing boils but tempers, anything in this army seems a snap. One day at dusk, someone said he wounded an elk that plunged into a gorge and got away. We rode 22. Then walked, then stalked the bloodspore up a ridge, then struck a chasm where the moon could cast no light, and smack, a heavy growl shook the ground. 2 balls of fiery eyes, our rifles emptied at the mark, and instead of a stately elk we brought a 9-foot cougar down. His arms were big as millposts. Here I am in a troop of volunteers who can't tell elk from cougar. Wait till the war breaks out in earnest, then even French Canadians will be running for their lives. You see when you come out how well us folks will treat you. In any case, I have a lot to say about you, wherever I go, and no, I don't think people realize how long this war may last. They say not long, our Union with more than 20 million souls against a piddling 5 of Rebs, but I'm not fooled. My little rescue party, that sprung old Dr. Doy from the St. Joe jail, ran into postmasters, detectives, agents of the Treasury Department, U.S. attorneys, field commanders, and a web of touts and toughs all deep inside the borders of a loyal state, who sink or swim would have it that the rule of slavery will prevail. You know all this from when I saw you back in Gotham, yet there's more to tell. Then, I only mentioned weeks I spent to try and spring John Brown from his cell at Harper's Ferry, but it takes a better nib than the one surviving in this army. 23. Pen for that, so I'll wait to tell you next time. Yes, send your book to me. Us troopers guard the mails and almost everything gets through except for apple butter and toilet soap that have a way of getting sidetracked in Missouri. Your leaves of grass will make it here for sure. As ever. S.I. P.S. Your poems will help to save this territory from the plague of verse in vogue. Beautiful Dutch, it's called. Here's one. Kotam Dachnik Vot Pites Mein Shan. He's all over plaque, mit fight spots on. He lavish in tergrass, and he fissel mit him tail. Kotam dat kotam schnik to hail. No more. Weep, for the muse is spent till payday. S. 24. Denver, Colorado Territory. November 15, 1862. Dear Sis. Mom writes you're back in Maine, working typesetter, proofreader, like it or not a mender of all that cometh out of the mouth and onto the page in Bangor. Selah. Are all those Baptists ready for some tales of barracks life? No need to answer. I'll write, you print what's fit. Herewith the chronicle of the tribes of U.S. cavalry and the wanderings of your lost brother, S.I. 6 words, the West is saved, Colorado ours. And now, for how it happened. The last you heard of me was from New Mexico. I'd just been made lieutenant by Kit Carson. But soon I found the scouts don't mix it up the way I'd fancied. I recalled your favorite bard, whither shall I betake me where subsist? Only I would have it where to fight. The governor here in Colorado settled me by ordering up a regiment of volunteers last Christmas, the Colorado 1st. They call it infantry, but lots of us showed up on horseback, many out of Carson's scouts. They made me first lieutenant, Company K, my first assignment keeping order in the ranks. Christmas 61. 25. Brought out the Cossack urge to forage through the alleyways of Denver City, picking hen roost locks and lifting 40-gallon barrels. At a knothole, a pistol would appear, at a trap hole piggies disappeared. And how our cooks did cook. You see no pay, no money in the company for months, and lo! The eighth of deadly sins, jayhawking. The good governor and his minion Methodists confined our regiment to barracks, with one result: we only came to barracks for our meals. So much for keeping order, hot water through a sieve. But drill we did, all through the winter, and so clear the air you could see the glaciers inching down the front range of the Rockies. By March we were a mostly sober regiment, ready to campaign. Though once in a while we'd have to strip a company of their arms and put them under arrest for mutiny. They wanted to be paid, and fight the Rebs, in equal measure. At last, Fort Leavenworth sent word for us to join with General Canby in New Mexico, recapture Albuquerque and Santa Fe from General Sibley's Texans. Our highest in command run true to Typetary Masons, setters of cornerstones, elders and deacons and boon companions of the governor, in short, not worth one impious expletive of a peripatetic repairer of damaged tin. 26. But our major proved exception to the rule. John Chivington by name, Chiv for short, he's hardly short at 6'4", 260 pounds, barrel chest and neck of a mature male bovine. Once a preacher, he flat refused a praying commission for the fighting Oneto, all our satisfactions, as you'll see. We rode along the front range down to Pueblo, then up across the Raton Pass through freshets of melting winter snows. At Trinidad we met the courier from Fort Union. The Rebs were on the march along the Rio Grande again, the fort was sure to fall. The major drew us up in line and asked if we would make forced march that night. We just had done enough days' march to turn old Natty Bumppo bottle green with envy, but off we slogged again, riding the wagons when our strength gave out. We did 64 miles in 24 hours, consecutive, and finally found the Rebs strung out across Apache Canyon. Old Chiv arranged our battle lines, the enemy was engaged, and when we charged it was one of those things I dreamed to see when I was a boy, a mountain of a man on a coal-black stallion, with 99 of us behind him, sabers drawn, charging through their ranks, our pistols flashing, slashing, drubbing. 27. Sabering, slaughtering. Quoth Chiv, I know of nothing else to do but fight. The Rebs had never seen our like, and when sundown came, they threw down their arms and ran for the hills. Then we had everything to do. We took one rebel prisoner for every one of us upon that field. Plus care for the wounded. Bury the dead. And try to save some strength, for more was sure to come. But how their officers argued! You'd think they'd won the battle and the war instead of bumbling into capture. As if states' rights and slavery were a Bible tract to hallelujah in our ears. At the end, I cut contention short with my favorite phrase from childhood: you may have the argument, but by God, I know I'm right. You remember how it does the trick. Next morning it was march again, to Glorieta Pass, 2 miles from where we'd fought them. It was their reserves, munitions and supplies, and a caravan of wagons, mules and horses snaking up the valley out of a giant egg of dust. This time we took them from the mountainsides, surprised the guards, spiked their supplies, ran their wagons all together, put them to the torch. General Sibley sent his flag of truce, begging leave to tend his wounded. In fact, he used the truce as cover for retreat. He even left his dead for us to bury. So much. 28. For Southern chivalry. But then, the hardest thing of all was what came last: first to corral, then bayonet 1,100 mules and horses left behind, to leave the Rebs without a way to hold New Mexico or Colorado or anything west of Texas or north of the Rio Grande. It was a bath of blood and screaming animals, but we did it, sis. And no one now can call us Bloodles weary Colorados first. So we're back in Denver, another Christmas almost here, and Governor Evans says we'll all be formally transferred to cavalry. Our major soon will be a colonel. Who knows, I'll soon be pushing silver bars. Captain Soul, wouldn't he that just shoot the works? What would our little brother think? Whoever hears from him, do you? It seems 6 centuries ago, that our teeth were chattering like spoons in a minstrel band inside our cabin down on Coal Creek, Kansas territory. You hated it, it ruined father's health, the slavery issue staggered on, one decade to the next. Kansas, the place where almost nothing can come out, where almost everything runs out. I miss us. I haven't got a soul. 29. To tease, no one quotes a line of poetry or brightens up my day with wholly useless facts. I know if you came here you'd send your heart in care of general delivery, you'd find a way to nurse the wounded, console tile living, rescind our judgment on those mules. After a week or so you'd make this wicked Denver city a Jerusalem. We'd be driving big bright bays, and listening to the doves and swallows at the eaves. Dreaming of youth and freedom, boundless as the sunshine is for all. Your S.I. 31. The Wolves of Heaven. Northern Cheyenne Reservation, Montana. Morning, August 15, 1911. The world is not so much a noun as an adjective. Gaston Bachelard. 33. The woman and the Manikomana, Frank Little Wolf. They've left the burial behind, they're riding slowly down to a river, to a sacred place, to the trees along the banks. To a camp, the gathering of the people. She can see the lodge poles in the distance, smell the cooking fires. She hears dogs, yapping. Beyond those sounds she hears a great heart beating. The presence of something other. Cold heart, beating. 34. The two of them are pledgers for the Massacre. His are the hands that will dig a lodge where the sacred tree will rise. Hers are the hands that will raise the trunk of that tree with lodge poles. No man will touch it, no other hand will touch it. And the tree will grow. 35. We are here, they call as they arrive, and then again we are here. At the door of every lodge in camp. Now they're ready. They're together with the people, in a land that isn't theirs. Ready for the oldest thing they know. The oldest thing the world's alive to. Their pledge for the world to be reborn. The Massacre. 36. The people gather round. Now Ikamina can begin to say her story. They were camped in tall grass country. But it wasn't theirs. They were confused. Game went into hiding. Nothing to eat. Nothing. It was a time to save the people. All of them together. Time to send out scouts. To straighten out the way. To bring good news. So to go out, and they find their way. Day after day they go, until for all fatigue, and footsore, they've found the way to the den of death. 37. Then they see the mountain, blue in the blue of sky. A lake lies shining at its base. Better to die on the mountain, both of them. They make a last half-day, and come to the water. That's when the water breaks and a great horned serpent wreathes around the younger one. Coil upon coil it comes, and he cries out in the power that holds him. The serpent takes him under. 38. The other, the elder, is a shaman and a healer. A man who knows just how to pray, how to be heard in the spirit world. Keep on, is the message in his blood. So he keeps on going. A sudden rush of wolf skin stops him. It's a man covered in a red wolf skin who dodges him, strikes the water, tears the water open, takes the serpent by the nape and cuts its throat. 39. The man then turns to the elder. Climb, he says, climb the mountain, find the standing rock. That rock will be a door. Put your shoulder to the rock and make it move, and then you'll see a woman old as the mountain. Tell her this. Tell her I the grandfather killed the serpent, the cunning serpent I've been hunting all my life. 41. The Letters of Silas Soule. April 1, 1863. Great historical transformations are always bought dearly, often after you thought you got them at a bargain price. Jacob Burckhardt. 42. Central City, Colorado Territory. April 1, 1863. Messrs. Thayer, Eldridge, Hinton, etc. Boston, Massachusetts. Gentlemen. Mr. Walter Whitman lays it pretty thick if he thinks my little stories of escape might touch a reader's finer sensibilities. At this late hour in the War of the Rebellion they may be more for the archives than beating drums. It all commenced 9 years ago, in a time almost inconceivable to me now. My father was Amos Soule. He brought our family out to Kansas Territory south of Lawrence with Company 5, emigrant aid. Coal Creek was our claim. All knew that we were abolitionists. My younger brother went by the name of William Lloyd Garrison Soule. Proof enough, we said, that we were a line of true Downeasters. But more a squiggle than a line, as it turned out. Malignant powers hemmed us in, Missouri and the U.S. Marshal played the devil with our enterprise, and it wasn't long before we saw Fort Scott and Franklin Pierce as evil twins, 2 peas in a pod in the arbor of calamity. Our freedom road. 43. 4 slaves was spied on constantly by a mongrel league of thugs, treasury detectives, postmasters, and deserters bent on bounty hunting. On our side, the totally unqualified rallied to the cause, I mean enthusiasts esteemed for want of any caution and experience, not to mention judgment. They came out west from Boston, trim on their English saddles, eager to act as troopers in a spectacle called Kansas. Dr. Doi was a black Republican. But when he thought to intervene in anything, be it erysipelas or slavery, he gave new meanings to his sobriquet, Sawbones. It was Reverend Ephraim Nude who gave him leave to escort up a dozen contrabands with families and not a single scout, no rear guard, nothing. Of course the mongrel league surprised him, seized the fugitives, the women, children, wagons, everything, turning them back toward Missouri and slavery once again. So Doi was taken. Missouri tried him, Kansas defended him, the jury finally did convict him. He got 5 years on the first of 12 indictments. In time, the total might have come to 60 years, with much abuse and villainy, and certain death. We gave up hope of all appeals. We saw we'd have to take him from his jail. Between us Coal Creek boys was $30 cash, 3 sporting rifles, a few revolvers, knives, a slungshot cast in lead. Not one. 44. Sharp's rifle could we use, these being the giveaway for abolitionists. We came to see that guile would have to do what force could not. It was then my youthful years in a whiting factory came to hand, the brogue of Irish workers gripped my tongue, the Pat and Mike jokes frolicked out along with a taste for whiskey and a tenor's croon. That was the birth of Doyle O'Boyle, the rebaptized Silas Soul. And he was vital to the plan. Do you know the one about the impish boy and the Baptist preacher? It seems this preacher railed for years against the fleshpots, and in time, he bushwhacked most of what Old Scratch laid claim to. Hardly a dram or a dance or a friendly faro game survived his slaughter of the venial. An April Sunday capped the climax, a great baptizing at the riverbank, the preacher led his lambs, the water glistened grandly in the sun. But one rogue boy there was who liked a friendly round at cards. He hallelujah'd right along with everyone, but when the preacher raised his arms and closed his eyes, he slipped a deck inside the sunless folds of that man's gown. Then step by step as preacher blight submerged, a spade and club armada sailed out of his holy folds and the waves did blush with forbidden hearts and diamonds. At last, there was absolutely nothing he could say. 45. Well, that was the way I came to town, with Gab and Gully for all. I made the others come as Pikes Peak boys, impatient to set out, chafing to buy a team and wagon. O'Boyle would want to sell them one, and so we all would move together through the streets, saloon after saloon. I also had to find the jailer, prick his boredom with a tale or two, then say I bore a word from Doy's dear wife. He was a decent sort. He told me to deliver it. He who tempers the winds to a chid of a lamb will not forget his child, who suffers for the kindness done unfortunates, I brogued, convincingly. The jailer wiped a tear. The doctor stood agape. My eye surveyed the cell. I kept on talking, lest the doctor gave it all away. Then I passed a message in a ball of twine, tonight at 12 o'clock. Later on we found we had the luck. The Duke of Dimley players were putting on the Orphans' Tragedy that night to benefit the Scottish Masons. The sober and the literate thus employed, we seized on one of us as horse thief, tied him with the slungshot cord, and brought him to the jail. The clouds were thick and hid the stars, the fog closed in, and you could almost sink your elbows in that darkness. Black as the feathers on a crow. Not a street lamp lit, the windows of the dwellings closed, and those not sober. 46. And the illiterate, asleep. We all held hands, snaking our way across the square. We banged on the jailhouse door. A window overhead flew up, the voice of my friend the keeper rang out clear. We have a horse thief here, I cried. When he opened up he asked if any had a warrant. Citizen arrest. I said, this Pikes Peak boy has tricked me in a sale. He stole my horse, and fled. We tracked him down and brought him in. And yet my friend was loath to take him into custody. He asked him if the charge was true, and was he guilty? With that, our Pikes Peak boy broke into such a torrent of abuse that even I was shaken, ending with, and I expect to have a trial. The jailer took the bait, I think that you're a thief. I'll take my chances, and I'll put you in. The doors opened, and going in we saw a drawing of a human skeleton. I nudged our Pikes Peak boy. He balked, I won't go into such a place. Oh yes you will, the jailer cried, stepping into the cell where Doy was waiting. Our guns were leveled, he saw our ruse. The doctor stepped out free. True to his failing, he'd told the other prisoners of his imminent release. We had to force them back at gunpoint in the cell. The jailer now was much confused. I said he must put out the light and lock the door and stay confined till daylight, At peril of his life. He begged me to consider. 47. How we'd compromised him. How could he explain? They'd think he acted in collusion with our band. In the morning you can publish what you will about this business, was my answer. When we get home we'll publish that you never once intended to assist us. I thanked him for his uniformly kind demeanor, took him by the hand, and cautioned him to do as I had said. The moon was up, the orphan's tragedy let out, and a brace of masons lent us lanterns while we cinched our saddles. Innocence and cunning, a fatal, lucky pair. Kansas taught me these, if nothing else. By February 1860 everything had changed. The only politician I admired, James Montgomery, formed a party. Thayer will recall this all too well, for he was in on it. Preacher Stewart, Thomas Wentworth Higginson, me, and 80 others. Our aim was the same, to free a prisoner, but what a difference in our reach. John Brown, the man not one of us had trusted back in Kansas, now enjoyed renown in places we forever would be nameless. Around him drew a net of public apprehension. He simply could not die for the raid at Harper's Ferry. I packed my traps. Next stop Charlestown, West Virginia, where I got myself arrested drunk, and sobered up on Sunday telling pat hand mics and singing jolly songs. 48. Tell me, why do jailers like me? In a week, I'd wangled what I hadn't dared to hope, an audience with Brown. Or at least, a talk, if you take a spare duet of well-armed guards as likely to redound the camaraderie. What can I say of that old man that isn't sung by every schoolboy in the Union? Plenty, is my answer. Though passing years may throw a haze around the temple of my memory, that day remains like crystal. Or better, frozen, as an ice-gray image in my mind. The old man seemed so old. Not just because his sons were martyred, or his ragtag private army routed. The snow was falling thick, but traveling the mountains posed no greater hazard, nothing more impregnable than his own will. Soul, he said without regard for Doyle O'Boyle, or the fact I'd penetrated every rampart just to see him. Soul, you know as well as I, our jailer bears no grudges, he's been much kinder than I think I would have been to him. You know the state militia keeps its eye on all of us. But the honor of a thing. His voice trailed off. When he looked at me again it was just like staring down a hoary eagle. You know as well as I do, only death on the gallows can bring fulfillment of my mission, the rounding out of all my efforts. No single act 49. Of mine would make my work to free the slaves effective, more than that. I thought to interpose objections, that my associates would give their lives most willingly to set him free again no matter how the state militia watched and waited. But I knew that none would move him. He said, remember I am worth more to die than live. As if the whole of thraldom and the crime of slavery turned upon one single axis, his own death. And he knew I knew that he was right. So the last escape was no escape at all. And Doyle O'Boyle, discharged by an unsuspecting justice of the peace, absquatulated promptly to the Quaker state. Lifetime result, 1 out, 1 in. It's not a happy average for a banker, for a soldier of the line, damn good I'd say. Don't you? Just remember you can't save someone who refuses to be saved. That mark of exclamation should be doubled when you're detailed to recruiting volunteers, as I am now. I saw some action at Apache Canyon, but since, I only write up posters. Poor old thing. A bounty to be paid. Bullwhackers, miners, loyal to your country. Any man can come a pauper and muster out with money left to start a bank or run a quartz mill. You bet your life. And so on. Thayer should recall a lot of what I say. 50. Of this. I haven't had a word from Higginson in months. The last I knew, he was mail order writing master to half the scribbling women in New England. Now I hear he's colonel to a regiment of coloreds. Tell him I stake Walt Whitman up against his bells from Amherst and Poughkeepsie every time. As for me, my sojourn with the Muse is ended. No more tippling at the Pyrean spring. The local caravanserai serves cocktails, Oporto wine and red rot. Mix. The net result, a grateful patriot. I'm off. Fear not. No snakes are lurking in my boots. Yours. Silas Soul. P.S. Yet. 51. 2. 53. The Wolves of Heaven. Northern Cheyenne Reservation, Montana. Afternoon, August 15, 1911. That people could come into the world in a place they could not at first even name and never had known before, and that out of a nameless and unknown place they could grow and move around in it until its name they knew and called with love, and called it home, and put roots there and love others there, so that whenever they left this place they would sing homesick songs about it, and write poems of yearning for it, like a lover. William Goyen. 55. Ekamina has stopped her story. Now it's time to smoke a pipe with the spirit of the tree Frank Little Wolf must cut down. It's his turn now to speak. Straight young Cottonwood, we're here today to do what we've been told we ought to do by the two who taught us from the time they learned this speaking. We ask you, be our tree for Massam. May every tree and blade of grass and fall of fruit be hail and thrive forever. And we ask that if we do not do this duty without mistakes, forgive us. Forgive our hands. Forgive our hearts. 56. He fells it. He trims it up, except for 7 branches at the top. 7, for the 7 stars. And the song is the woman's song, is the soughing of wind in the boughs that are singing in the other world. The two of them drag the tree to camp. Frank Little Wolf digs 5 holes. 4 for the points, for the wind horizons, for the realms where all find life. And 1 in the center, the deepest one, that he must dig before their first day's work is done. Into it, Ekamina tips the laid-out tree with lodge poles, up toward heaven, right in the heart of the blue sky lodge. 57. Around it, they frame their lodge. It faces toward the mountain. Blue Mountain. It faces toward the lake. They cover it with skins. Now the tree of life is standing at the center of their lodge. It stretches through the smoke hole with its branches high above. Rustling in wind. Cooling the skins. Blessing all beneath it with its shade. 58. They name it Wolf Lodge. It's as round as the world and it doesn't need a door. They scrape up the sod. The earth shines forth. They bring white sage. Box elder wood for a fire that's not yet built. World upon world. World under world. World waiting to be. 59. Then they light the fire. They light the will. They light the power to be. 60. Now Ekamina can say more of her story. So the elder, the shaman, begins to climb. To the tree and snow line, to the rocks, and the one great rock in the rock face. He leans his weight against it. It swings aside. A woman stands there. The wind whistles through her eyes. Old woman. Grandfather killed the serpent. She creeps from rock to rock behind him as they go back down. Grandfather, the wolf man, is waiting there. 61. The elder helps him pull the serpent out. The young one still lies sleeping in its coils. He doesn't breathe. Old woman picks up a stone, a gleaming flint. She splits the serpent's skull. She splits the serpent down its spine. She pulls the young man's body out. Cuts up the coils in packloads. They haul it all back up the mountain. 62. If you look in her door you see a sacred cave. It's a place for listening to the spirits. There's a sweat lodge built on one side. The lodge of Grandfather Wolf Man. An old woman. By now the elder knew the two were spirits. Spirits that had the power. They fire the sweat lodge stones. They feed the stones with water. The young man starts to breathe. His spirit gleams behind his eyes. Old woman gives them each a white flint knife. Old woman feeds them out of white stone howls that are thin as snow crust. 63. Now tell us why you're here, she says. Tell us all. And he takes a breath and begins to tell them all. 65. The Letters of Silas Soul. October 7, 1863, August 29, 1864. In skating over thin ice, our safety is in our speed. R. W. Emerson. 66. Central City, Colorado Territory. October 7, 1863. Dearest Mother. How proud you'd be to see your eldest son. I'm acting Adjutant General for Colonel Chivington, inspection tours, reports, the works. You and Sis both write that I should be a Christian. Not be so wild. Well, how about a Methodist preacher for a boss? It's true, my lips are innocent of rum and fine-cut chew, I get along like I was 17 again. The colonel says I'll be a captain soon. For now, no ostrich feathers in my cap. My brass is getting green and my socks are wearing through. The farther up in rank I go, the farther off the payroll gets mislaid. Once I wished to hie me hither, home, or California or some other foreign place. I used to want to pay my debts, but now this country's full of ore and nuggets, half the miners talk Chinese or Spanish, the debts are everywhere along with EIS for the pay we're owing. All this to say I can't send any money now, as much as I would like to. Yeah, blessed are the poor, for they have nothing to lose. Or something like. Take heart, our last week's cloudburst. 67. Swept away the Rocky Mountain News, or rather, all its fonts and plates and paper, leaving the press to the hapless liars that own it. Who can have the blues when the Creator moves in such inscrutable and righteous ways? Your loving. S.I. 68. Christmas Eve, 1863. 2. Mr. Walter Whitman, C/O Paymaster. Office, U.S. Army, Washington City. Dear Walt. Your book and letter both go everywhere with me. And yes, the Army don't improve a fellow much. A week ago, in Denver, a cannibal from the South Sea Islands whistled through a whalebone in his lip and turned his joints all out of shape, one by one, and bone by bone. And all for just a greenback dollar. You see how civilized we are out here, when we put our wits to work. Well, that was last week. Now I'm just outside Missouri City looking for recruits. The end of the year is on us, the numbers haven't shown, and any man with any brains is back in Denver anyway. But we go on. The war is nothing here, just bunting, flags, and flummadiddle. Of course, they talk of union, God, and freedom. What keeps the governor going is holy Orem. Gold. My colonel is his bosom buddy, he says protected and kept quiet Colorado yields up 20 million cold in specie now and double that in years to come. The national debt. 69. And so on. But in fact these gold fields all sit squat in the middle of the Cheyenne lands, I mean squat, by treaty, governor or no. The Cheyennes haven't a clue to this. They just seem to dream, their dreams are all of buffalo and land and spirits. And now, of how to keep from starving. No holy light of gold, no Holy Ghost to bring them food. I hope they never get the clue. I've staked out 50 claims, without a hope of working them. Hope without work isn't that the way the poet put it? You must excuse my lack of earnestness, nothing I say can satisfy the sense of dread I feel in reading what you wrote from Fredericksburg. That heap of amputated feet 10 yards outside the hospital, a full load for a one-horse cart, the medleys of wounds that range from pretty bad to frightful, the sea of men in tattered clothes, battered and bloody, and all the while, you looking for your brother, only to find him. I wish I knew where I could find my little brother. I wish that I could even look for him, but I can't. I look and look for a war that seems to have fled my side of North America and come to lie like an incubus on yours. You say you live most frugally, you nurse the sick both north and south alike. You say, at the last, it is the worst of war. 70. Is there a better part? Boredom. Profiteering. A second conquest of Indians. I think of all I did in Kansas, then I look at now, and wonder how decease could call me forth, as you put it. But I do believe you, Walt. Yours is no book. I touched its poems and touched the Quaker that you are. You won't get rich as Marshal of the Bedpan and Captain of the Linen Compress. God bless you, Walt. If he is listening. Yours. S.I. 71. Denver City, Colorado Territory. August 29, 1864. Major Kit Carson. U.S. Scouts, New Mexico Territory. Dear Kit. Recall that pair of silver bars we talked about so often? Well, the veil of Mars's temple bath been rent in twain. They're mine. But it took 3 years, including time as adjutant and chief recruiting officer for Colonel Chivington, 2 battles, and a ream of right-hand answers to Dunnings from the left, I mean, reports on operations no one ever heard of, acknowledgements of food and gear we never got, you know, the quartermasters. I been detailed to join the regulars, to keep the Injun hordes at bay. I doubt the destitute Cheyennes could ever set these Methodists at hazard, for sure no more than their own fire-eaters could. I'm to Fort Leon. That place is falling down, not a spud to eat, the scurvy broken out. The privilege of rank. I'll keep you posted. Anyhow, the lodestone here in Denver City still is gold. Alas, my days with the placer pen are long since gone. The Governor. 72. Is glad the Injuns too are gone, nothing to impede the march of the quartz mills, quote unquote. Except the rains. Gully washers, days of them. All of Auraria washed away. The miners lost their tools and tents, you never saw so many sober angry men, for here. The rumor is, the Gov's about to raise another regiment of 100 Dazers. 3 squares, a flop, and Salversan. But I'll be gone. I wouldn't want a regiment like that within 100 miles. Old Chiv's been out of action since Apache Canyon. Now he's running for a seat in Congress. How can he run and take command? Don't answer. I'll gladly take my leave of the colonel, I bequeath him to some other adjutant. He ordered the Fords under special wartime powers to buy 1,000 California Broncos for the Dazers. Well, as they say, no matter, scrip and greenbacks go flying through the air, the Rebs have crossed Missouri into Kansas, the war's a mess. Anyhow, the Broncos, when the man-mountain colonel gives his men the word to mount, his pick and shovel dragoons will find they 50 score unbroken, skittish, wild-eyed cayuse. I can see it now. Some stand on their heels, straight up in the air, and then as suddenly pitch on their forelegs, sending the swearing miners just like rockets off in space. 73. Some will stick their heads down, clump their feet together, then hump their backsides like a camel, with similar additions to the atmosphere. They roll, they kick, hazes of malediction rise like pillars of fire over Denver City. They'll be a perfect study, jackrabbits for Bronx, jackasses for men. Prosit. You see, I'm now a better soldier. And a worse subaltern. S.I. 75. The Wolves of Heaven. Northern Cheyenne Reservation, Montana. Morning, August 16, 1911. In the 6th month, the white snow is suddenly seen to fly. At the 3rd watch, the disk of the sun sends out shining rays. On the water blows the wind of gentleness. The land that is nowhere, that is the true home. The secret of the golden flower. 77. It's the 2nd dawn, and the beginning is aching to be born. They're both awake, Ekamina and Frank Little Wolf, and they're waiting for the light. The rest of the people are sleeping. You can hear the whiffling of horses tethered beyond their lodges. A baby cries. Suddenly someone comes. Who? No one can know. It's enough to know only that he is sent, enough that he will help them start the spirit work. As first light breaks, he goes inside the wolf lodge. He is the one who hollows out the fresh scraped earth, once with the thumb and 4 times more for the 4 horizons, then raises up 4 mounds. 78. With earth from the first, then paints first 2 with matin red then 2 with crow at midnight, then marks out wonderful arms of light in white cross of daybreak forming out of the one. And flowing outward, everywhere. 79. Maho is the one. Is at the center. Is the one who speaks to eagle. Who turns the feathers of its head and neck the color of sun, for his hearing. Listen, you. Listen to his deep voice singing. Hang up bundles of sage. Bless what is coming alive. 80. Ekamana can feel something stirring. What? Inside her something comes alive. A spirit picture. It's a plain as vast as this one, but farther on. Closer to Blue Mountain. And a creek, with a grove of cottonwoods along its bend. And her people. Pent up. Hungry. They're there because they're made to be, and yet with quietness of spirit. One that whispers to them more can come. 81. This was where the massacre at Sandy Creek began? She asks herself. She wants to know. What does the smoke say? She would know if she could smell the fires. 82. She thinks of the burial, 2 days ago. It was something she'd set straight. One thing, one tiny thing, now in its narrow house. But she'll never know just who it was. So many dead. Her grandmother, Crow woman. Hundreds more. And what of those who'd lived? Lived day by day to start the darkening downward journey into shame for having been deceived. Who'd trusted in the white man? Black Kettle, for one. It was he who said, "My shame is as big as the earth." It was he who said it. The one who taught them. 83. She thinks, so many stories. Stories are the whole world. The world we're in, the world that's yet to come, they're all stories. I want to know. I want to tell them all. Yes. She hears the people say. Ekamana. Tell us all. 85. The Letters of Silas Soul. October 9, 1864. Adversity introduces a man to himself. Anonymous. 86. Fort Leon, Colorado Territory. October 9, 1864. Dear Sis. 3 years in Denver City never got me ready for this poor pathetic wiki-up of cavalry and Indians. The army sent its troopers into the wilderness, and closed its eyes. I don't know who to blame or who has suffered more. The Indians, a few Arapaho and thousands of Cheyennes, are all pent up like snow geese in October. They hear their fellows, they spread their wings, us bluecoats beat them down again. They're on the dole, they dance, they only dream of hunting. The Indian agent's wife sells pies she makes with the Cheyenne flour allowance. Mrs. Colley got more rations on her hands than the U.S. cavalry and northern tribes combined. There's nothing to be done. But I do ask, why such cruel neglect and misery? And only us, the Cossacks, to give some consolation. I'm serving with the regulars. The generals, Blunt and Curtis, want us local boys to chase the Indians. They already tried their hand, at the end they shot more buffalo than braves, and now they're off to chasing. 87. Rebs. The Fort Command, Major Wynkoop, Major Anthony and me, receive a stream of orders out of Denver from the governor. They all add up to let 'em starve or any man in sympathy with Indians. Or lock them all away somewhere, forget them. We do. But we lock ourselves away as well. It started back on April 12 at a place called Fremont's Orchard. The Cheyennes steal the stock from an emigrant named Ripley. They also cut the telegraph. This last is smart, but fatal. Smart, because the Cheyennes know just where the white man's pulse is beating. Fatal, just because the white man knows they know it. One reprisal follows on another, now whole villages, warriors, women, children, even dogs and horses massacred, put to the torch. The Cheyennes also know a trick or two. Some of them steal a girl named Laura Roper out of Kansas, trade her from lodge to lodge, then come up with her at our parley on the Smoky Hill last month. A gift, they say. They want to seal a peace forever. Of course they'd killed the father, the mother hanged herself, etc. What do you do when you're standing on an anthill, barefoot? You find a chief you think you trust, then try to pair him with a chief of your own kind. 88. That was what we tried to do on the Smoky Hill, to get their chiefs, Left Hand, Black Kettle, with our Colonel Winecoop, John Smith, George Bent, yours truly. Even a chief they call Bull Bear showed up. He heads an outfit called Dog Soldiers. Don't ask me why. Anyhow we got a truce patched up between us. A war with the Cheyennes now would only help the Rebs, not us. Or that's the logic of it. Making it work is more like putting shoes on a centipede. The Cheyenne chiefs are full of honor for themselves, none for their brothers-in-law just over the hill. Our side swears eternal peace, but no one knows what a testy Mormon teamster might be prone to do to a red-face back of beyond Gentile. What we absolutely do not want is another Hungate massacre, a family slaughtered, scalped and mutilated, bodies brought to Denver, placed in a box and put on display so every chucklehead can cry revenge. The Indian bodies never get to town, and no one there has ever laid their eyes on a plane of castaways like this. Never. Out of sight and out of mind. Or better yet, invisible and absolutely gone. The governor got the tantrums over what we did at the Smoky Hill, but finally had to bend. He called a formal council at Camp Weld to sign and seal a truce. 89. The Cheyenne chiefs all gussied up in beads and feathers, our officers in brass and ostrich plumes, interpreters and scribes and all solemnity. White Antelope showed off a medal Millard Fillmore gave him, Black Kettle said he made his peace with eyes shut, going with bluecoats as if through fire. My former boss, Old Chiv, was full of bluff and bluster, all the soldiers in this country ride at my command, and so on. When the governor signs, he thinks to his own advantage of what the treaty doesn't say. Another step in getting all the gold fields, grazing lands, railroad right-of-ways. The Indian doesn't sign, he marks, he thinks of what he thinks the treaty says. Protection. Rations. Peace. It says what men say, now, and say again, and say forever. The worst he can imagine? Shame. The Cheyenne pledges all. Himself. That fact will sway his fellows, even to end his life by his own hand. The one in the middle of this Congress of the deaf, on our side, and mute, on theirs, is me. It takes your spirits down an octave. It's every day, you work at making bricks without the straw. In the end, it's really like the Cheyenne see it, we're worth about as much as we remember, what we are is what we do. The rest is dust. Which means I'm getting pretty dusty. I get up dirty, eat some grits for breakfast. 90. Ride through dust and sand, curry the burrs out of my horse's coat, then lay my head on a pillow tinged by the sandman's grubby hand. I think I'll muster out. I dream of Maine and marrying. Know of some rich widow? I'm something of a catch. I've given up cigars, don't chew, I've got a pile of EIS for pay enough to start a bank. Right soon. Your loving. S.I. 91. 3. 93. The Attack. November 29, 1864. If men would learn from history, what lessons it might teach us? But passion and party blind our eyes, and the light which experience gives is a lantern on the stern which shines only on the waves behind us. St. Coleridge. 95. Monday after Thanksgiving. And the colonel has his regiment, the Colorado 3rd. They're mounted 100 daysers, all volunteers, armed with rifles, muskets, carbines, Colts and Stars, 150,000 cartridges, 20 bags of powder, a ton of lead, 4 howitzers, sabers, saddles, spurs, singles, all the quartermastering anyone could want, and their guidance streaming in the wind. But most of his troops are raw recruits. Come close, you see only a scattering of uniforms, you hear the slash of hooves through snow crusts, the heaves and rowels from deep inside the horse's lungs. 96. The colonel looms in his saddle. At 6 feet 4 he rides like an emperor next to his half-breed guide, the talkative Robert Bent, who rattles on through the hours toward daybreak. Wolf, he howl. Injun dog, he hear that wolf, and he howl too. Injun, he hear dog. He listen. He hear something, then run off. The colonel laughs. He draws his Colt and spins its cylinder in little clicks, saying, "Jack, I haven't had an Indian to eat for weeks. If you don't get your half-breed ass in gear and lead us to that camp, I'll have it in a skillet for my breakfast." Bent falls silent. Under the winter moon the command moves like an amoeba over the landscape, walk, trot, gallop, dismount and lead. The colonel lets his troops take out their hardtack for a gnaw. He hears a growl of discontent. They can feel the bugs between their teeth but they can't see them. The colonel chooses not to listen. They slog on. Suddenly they're in a shallow lake. Is the half-breed trying to sabotage the stores of ammunition? The colonel orders strict precautions. And he watches now a second line of columns moving in behind them, the regulars he seconded. 97. At Fort Leon. Their guide is Black Jim Beckwith, their detachments of the Colorado 1st, some from Denver, some stationed at the fort. Volunteers. And regular army. Beware of them, he thinks. Some of them the day before had hunkered down, refused to fight with Indians they said had saved their lives. Typical of RA officers who fought their best in finding reasons not to fight. They'd even called the Cheyennes ill-treated, misunderstood, prisoners already, camped along Sand Creek at Army sufferance. Not at my sufferance. The colonel roared, and he promptly wrapped his third in a rude embrace around Fort Leon, posted sentries, gave strict orders no one could leave. He came down hard on all the officers, and one especially, Captain Soule, who called his plan of operations murder pure and simple. The thought of it drives the colonel's fist into his pommel. Damn all Indians, damn the murdering Cheyennes, damn their massacres along the Platte, damn Silas Soule, and damn all white men and officers in sympathy with Indians. Let them get themselves out of the service of these United States. His orders come from the governor. He knows he can impose his will. 98. Soule is in command of Company D. Colorado 1st. He keeps them well apart from the colonel's troops, if troops are what you call them. Central City miners, flooded out last summer, in for 100 days of pay then back to the diggings. Only a very few with stomachs for a real campaign, and now with this cold sick to death of soldiering. The kind of troops no one can command, that early in this war to save the Union proved the depths of their Dutch courage. Ragtag volunteers that come sweeping down on regulars compelling them to do the dirty work. 99. For Colonel Lunatic, Fort Chiv, as they call him, whose evening entertainment starts when the cook gets mad at someone, throws a burning brand streaming like a comet, and soon the air is full of brands. It's Farragut at New Orleans, the night becomes a blaze of meteors and shooting stars, and in the end there is no supper, not even coffee. The volunteers get whooping drunk while their colonel sits indoors, dressing down the officers. This former circuit rider, this Mason Methodist, size 14 boots, says he's come to bring them to a rendezvous. An apocalypse. Dawn. Steel gray as birdshot. They're riding on a sand hill with the creek curving across the line of march below. Only a gleam of water there, cottonwoods and willows along the banks. Clumps of lodges thrown down like pine cones catch the sun's first rays. He counts 115, 8 Arapaho, the rest Cheyenne. Soule knows the difference. He knows the colonel doesn't care, In fact, bloodless third has come for blood, for a victory in a year when nothing else will do. They can't think any farther than their balls. They're a brace of bulldogs straining at the leash. 100. But it's the dogs below that give the first alarm, a yip, a bark, a howl, or two, then duets, trios, soprano howls, tenor yawps, a rising cannon of mutts and mongrels no one could sleep through. Except they do sleep through, deep in a dream of trust, because their chief Black Kettle smoked a peace pipe 2 months since with Soul and the other officers, then saved the lives of 120 troopers on the Smoky Hill, and sleeps now with the stars and stripes as keepsake by his pipe. The one who trusts the most now sound asleep in the arms of his belief. As Soul counts off the seconds, minutes, an Indian woman steps from a lodge and gives a long appraising look, then turns her head downstream to where the Cheyennes keep their ponies tethered, then back at them again. What does she think? That they're a herd of buffalo, come from the Smoky Hill? His heart is strangely moved by her delay. It is as if the truth of what they are must fight its way brain cell by brain cell while she gazes, the promises, the treaties, peace pipes, blankets, gifts thrust aside by a gleam of steel in morning sunlight. She puts her head back, raises up her arms. 101. He is asleep. He is talking to Coyote. Coyote is inside Buffalo's skull. He has made himself small to be the master of small spaces, to dance and sing about himself, about his trickster ways. He says, "Come out, Coyote, come out, I tell you." Coyote keeps on dancing. "You're dancing on a pitfall." Coyote laughs, "Oh no, I'm not. Never do I dance in a man's scent. But you, Black Kettle, where do you dance? This land in the hook of the curve of Sandy Creek, isn't it a skull drawn in sand? But where are its bones? The capsules of its eyes? Whose scent do you dance and sing in, under the moon?" 102. He hears what Coyote says. He hears it heavily. But he doesn't leave his sleep. Not yet. There is more to ask of Coyote. He feels it. But what? He feels it somewhere, but not upon his tongue. Somewhere between his ears and eyes and mouth, but not upon his tongue. His enemy, slowness of speech. That is why he waits to hear what Coyote says, the master trickster always 20 paces out ahead. Not the bravest, not the best, but out ahead. As a young man, how he wished to ride in front. And now, like cottonwood, his wishes fill the winds with drifting feathers. Coyote keeps on talking, but his voice is high and thin and fading. He can see that Coyote's jaws are moving. That smile of his, that little shake of his head in confidence. It makes him lean down closer. There are tiny drummers, he can hear them now, Coyote's kinsmen gathering in from the flyways of geese and crane, from the runs of prairie dog and rabbit. How can they squeeze in such a space? And yet they seem to keep on coming. A hubbub. He can hear the click of bones as they bet their luck. He wants to cry out and joke and boast with the best of Coyote's kin. 103. But Iya is what he hears, the little lighted skull, the drummers, singers, dancers, gone. A smell of ashes, buffalo robes, and dark. Iya, it comes again. He knows the voice of Crow Woman, the rising note that stops in the back of her throat, the warning note that brings him up and running to the opening, where he sees her standing still as a blasted tree, her arms extended at the ring of sand hills above the creek. There is a glint of light on steel, feathers of breath from men and horses spinning upward, a whinny, then a mule's complaint, then a shout. And the line of horsemen starts to spill over the slope. He sounds Crow Woman's cry, then again, and the camp has come alive with moving men and women. He springs inside his lodge, seizes his lance, the flag, and a white linen rag. He ties the two of them to the shaft and sweeps it back outside, raising it high to the peak of his lodgepole where the wind unfurls them both. The flag. Their very flag. And the flag of peace. Together. He can see the columns riding toward them. Mounted. Some are bluecoats, their sabers drawn. The high-pitched yells, the bugles. And now, the shooting. 104. His orders. First, they strap their overcoats to their saddles. Second, he sends 3 companies between the lodges and the herds, then brings them to firing. To open the ball, as the colonel likes to put it, shouting then, "I wouldn't tell you men to kill the women and the children, but just remember all the women and the children on the Platte these bloody savages have killed." Echoing the words the governor has used already, "exterminate by any means," the phrase filling the air, drumming like the hoofbeats of the next 3 companies he orders into the bed. 105. Of Sandy Creek to add their fire. Then the howitzers begin to belch while 2 more companies scale the sand bluffs on the south to catch the village in a crossfire. As he looks down on the scene, the colonel notes with pleasure and amusement how the bucks and squaws are running first this way, then that, faster and faster into a dead fall, showing signs of their slow-wit surprise that white men could be masters of surprise. I teach a lesson in bushwhacking no one forgets, he thinks, savoring again his triumphs over the Rebs at Apache Canyon, Glorieta Pass. In '62, in a war to save the Union that since has walked around him, high and dry. But those 2 battles had been wholly his, stamped with his name and fame, first by turning down the gold-embroidered leaves of chaplain and taking up a fighting rank, battalion major, then by the boldness of his coup, routing a rebel wagon train, 85 bonfires of ammunition, clothing, harness, forage, lighting up the night. Followed by the solemn ritual of bayoneting more than 1,000 mules and horses on the spot, 3 days of backbreaking butchery. 106. Before he sent his master stroke, his brief communiqué, "The West is saved, Colorado ours." And what delirium had followed. And then 2 years of silence. The growing buzz of rumors that his bold success had been an overstatement. Politics, jealousy. The savages are fleeing to the creek bed, digging with their hands to scoop out holes to hide in. He looks down now to count the units he's deployed and comes up short by 1. It's Soule, the adjutant reports, pointing to a company drifting slowly out of range. He's sitting on his hands. He refused to give your orders to his men, he says. John Smith had got safe conduct from the officers into that camp 2 days ago. The mountain man. Soule says he's pretty famous, he ain't a Indian, and if your troopers kill him there'll be hell to pay. Suddenly it's clear, the colonel's being outflanked and it's Soule who's played this trick, Soule who mocks him, smart-ass Silas Soule who boasts he almost saved John Brown from hanging at Harper's Ferry. The jolly jokester, as they call him, a veteran as well of Apache Canyon, Glorieta Pass. But well down somewhere in the ranks. Down where he'll soon be again. And hurting. The colonel will see to that. 107. He can tell the moment the adjutant relays his message. Even from across a draw, Soule can see the colonel freeze, then rise like a quill in his saddle. Looking around. For him. Word of Smith has changed nothing, not a thought for anything except what's sitting on the colonel's shoulder whispering murder in his ear. He can see a garrison flag and a white flag flying from a lodge pole. Black Kettle stands beneath, hands upraised and saying something. The colonel's troops are closing slowly, firing on a whirling mass of men and women, howling dogs and huddled clumps of children. 108. Never in his life has he had to stand and watch, never had to say his no and stick by it, never worn a uniform that hangs like snakeskin, never knowingly deceived an officer, never seen such overwhelming force, never felt such heat of burning bloodlust, never wished the human race extinct, never known the hand of desperation at his throat, never felt his heart so fiercely quartered, never probed so near the nerve of hopelessness, never held the fiery coals of shame, never raised them to his lips and swallowed. Ain't this the shits? It's his first lieutenant, Johnny Oster, just behind him. And farther back, there's Hill, his sergeant. And Gibbons. Durkee. Burns and Eaton. The privates, with him since '61. Anderson and Burgess. Creech and Fairbanks. Morris, Reading, Sherman. Vandenberg, Yarrow and Wilson. Suddenly it comes to him he's not alone. 20 of them, 4 columns wide, they're like blue adamant above this wave of flotsam soldiery that surges over the banks, firing on and on, firing into the dead, killing the dead twice. 109. Over, some of them not waiting for the end but taking out their bowie knives to start to hack at the scalps, to take off fingers 3 at a time and get at the rings, to take the noses, take the ears, take the lips and testicles, take the blankets, take the buffalo robes, take the halters, take the knives and lances, take the skirts and leggings, take the shirts and moccasins, take the pipes, the bows and arrows, take the beadwork, take the feathers, take the sacred medicine, tomahawks, a pair of rusty muskets, take the dolls and doll clothes. It is as if there is no bottom. A cry goes up and 100 Dazer gallops through the carnage with a bloody pyramid of flesh hanging across his saddle bow, the pubic hair and blood glistening in the midday sun. They're cutting out the private parts of squaws and next they'll throw papooses in the air and stick them. And he just sits there. He is beyond the reach of feeling when the colonel gallops up and starts to yell at him. But Soul has died already. Died to the life around him. Died to threats and blustering. To the heat of bloodlust. And now he knows the colonel plans to kill him, too. 110. He calls out to his people not to give in to fear, not to doubt the bluecoats still protect them. Words like his wishes, words like cottonwood. White Antelope confronts him, tells him look them in the eye, Black Kettle, see what kind of men they are, then runs to the middle of the creek, holding his 2 arms high and naked in the air and calling on the horsemen not to fire. He sees the riflemen keep coming on, White Antelope now folds his arms, he hears some snatches of his death song just before the white men shoot him down. He sees him fall. The line wavers, knives begin to flash. 111. It is his shame. The bravest and the best of fighting chiefs, White Antelope has given up his spirit. With just a cough. The smallest spiral of his breath. Gone. Stifled by a tightening coil of white men. Some are bluecoats, some are not. But not a face familiar to him, he cannot tell a white man from a white man, not a one who came for anything but killing. And more than killing, more than merely making dead. Desire, without the heat of passion. Rage as cold as winter ice. As the cold of snowbank sleep. From the land where men no longer know themselves or know a brother. His shame is as big as the earth. Black Kettle has thought himself to be the only one who persevered to be the friend of white men. And now he sees just where that trail has led him. He sees another camp, another stream, at dawn, a time not far ahead. Him, with his people. An attack by bluecoats. And one especially, whose blonde and curling scalp lock falls from underneath his hat across his neck and shoulders. The white men cleaning out the lodges, taking horses, taking fingers, noses, ears. Everything. Time only for a breath of death song, before the end. 112. He hears a whine, just a little whine close to his ear. The voice of Coyote. Black Kettle, he says, Black Kettle, time to run and save the people you can save. He hears the voice moving away from him and yet distinct in all the din, come after me, it says come after me, I know a way out yet. Follow the earth. Along the left-hand fork of Sandy Creek. You wait too long, too long. Now call who can be called, and follow me. He leaves his lodge to plunge into the scene around him, shouting that they follow him, the men and women. Hugging the ground, the thunder of the big guns shaking the air, stopping their breath as they run and stop, run and stop, threading their way from burning lodge to bloating horse to creek bed clumped with bodies. Make yourself small. He hears the voice of Coyote, he says it to his followers, and he feels a broken line behind him, a ragged trail of stragglers coming now, still dodging, running 2 lengths back and 3 lengths forward, inching their way along the left-hand fork where the white men do not see them. Running hard, their breath like telltale feathers in the emptiness of sky. 113. The Letters of Silas Soul. February 12, 1865 April 15, 1865. The only joy in the world is to begin. Cesare Pavese. 114. February 12, 1865. 2. Mr. Walter Whitman, C/O Paymaster. Office, Washington City. Dear Walt. The Cheyennes didn't get their lands. Or food. Or justice. What they got was slaughtered. Last November 29th. The governor sent out Colonel Chivington and a regiment of 100 Dazers just to kill the ones that camped under our protection down at Sandy Creek. Along the way they managed to surround Fort Leon, dragoon the Colorado First and me. The colonel cried for vengeance, said he'd string up any son of a bitch who'd bury their bodies or their bones, quote unquote. It wasn't an army, it was a mob. I flat refused to order in my men or open fire. I soon found out what's underneath that hide of Christian love. That colonel preacher went at me like I was 666 itself. But I stuck fast. 2 days I testified before an army board, the colonel shouting challenges, the works. I thought of you, and not without a smile. I mean, here I am a soldier hectored by a colonel just because I wouldn't fight. A preacher, who wanted to kill the innocent, up against an infidel. 115. Who wouldn't? What do you make of that? Anyhow, about a half the population want to kill me. The other half are getting there. But some Episcopals are showing signs of backbone and the army's on my side. Do I know what Quakers must go through? Fraternal greetings. Your friend. S.I. 116. Denver City, Colorado Territory. April 15, 1865. Dearest Mother. The news of Lincoln's death just came. This last, most comfortless of losses. We say to ourselves, it's just a month since he took his oath, forswearing malice, pledging charity for all. The Great Amendment passed, the slaves are freed, a Negro lawyer sworn before the highest court, the bottom rails are now on top. The Rebs gave up their flag at Appomattox just 5 days ago, and today one shot by one assassin ends it all. The victory snatched away. What a nest of treachery this war has grubbed up out from under rocks and hiding places in men's souls. Devoured by dark desires they fight to fight and kill to kill. Before I went to Kansas I learned by heart that speech of his, the ballot is stronger than the bullet. Now I see, bullets are strong. Our years in Kansas, all my years out here, the constant grinding down by death, how much is lost, never to be retrieved. There's more. You heard from Sis about the troubles with the Indians. Last November was a raid by 100 Dazers under Colonel Chivington to kill Cheyennes at Sandy Creek. It was murder. 117. Pure and simple. You know your boy, no matter how you push him, he's a bitter ender. I wouldn't order in my men, the colonel said he'd kill me for it. The whole affair has gone before the Congress. The worthy Denverites can't make up their mind if anyone's to blame, especially since the governor likes to run the colonel neck and neck with Xerxes, Alexander Washington, and Grant. How can we let this country run with the blood of settlers, quote unquote? He wrapped the flag around him like a sheet of armor plate, but out of the blue, spontaneous revulsion soon set in. Enlistments dropped to nothing. Feelings ran so high the generals did the unthinkable, they named your son the Denver Provost Marshal. It's a sign, they say, just how the army really feels about the colonel. And wouldn't my friend the keeper of the St. Joe jail have one big laugh to see me now, the nemesis of horse thieves, the one who puts the drunks and crooks away. You won't believe that Colonel Chivington has mustered out. I'd say he's shown his heels. He left the army flat. He's off to preaching to the frenzied, while I, the one who swore all up and down I'd muster out, I'm still in blue. Well, hail Columbia, sometimes the truth of what you are is what you don't discern until too late. And maybe even then it's dim. But for me, it's bright. 118. Brighter, brightest. For the last of my news is best of all. Your son is a married man. Her name, Teresa Coberly. Everyone calls her Hersa, I call her everlasting love of my life. Her family lives in Halfway House at Castle Rock. She, her sister, and her mother are a fine example of the virtues. Frank but modest, eyes as clear as Rocky Mountain springs. The father runs a stagecoach, whipsaws lumber, makes up furniture for all the swells in Denver City. I didn't know how gaining a crimson shoulder knot might also open up the door to dame matrimony, but there you are. I think the end of the war brought up a whole new brace of angels hail enough to turn old Jeremiah into a Jenny Wren. In any case, your son transmogrified. He's the flower of the flock. We even made it into Denver's best, who did the honors yesterday forenoon with a present of the flaxen order, immaculately white, one of those Victoria pins connecting all four corners. Also given, a specimen of the cunning art of joinery, shape of a juvenile chair, so scooped and sized to be of service with the former, shall we say a year from now. All this was done by Episcopals out of range of sensation preachers, village doctors, and strong-minded women. I'm not a convert yet, but Hersa says I'm working up. 119. The list. I can't explain my happiness. It came fast and furious, alongside bitterness and threats. When was it ever thus, that a soldier who wouldn't pull a trigger wore such laurels? Your loving S.I. P.S. Laurels or no, she loves to dance. 121. The Wolves of Heaven. Northern Cheyenne Reservation, Montana. Afternoon, August 16, 1911. Love is space and time made directly perceptible to the heart. Marcel Proust. 123. Now Ecomena says what comes next in her story. The young man tells of the tall grass country, of the game that has gone into hiding. Of nothing to eat, and saving the people. Then Grandfather Wolfman leaves the lodge. When he comes back, he brings a young woman of a kind they have never seen. She's good of all things in body. She sings, and her hair on top is the color of the sun. The elder knows she's the daughter of earth and thunder. She has heard Maho. 124. Grandfather asks, does one of you want to take this woman for your sister? Or will one of you take this woman for your wife? 125. The elder is a shaman. He knows the spirits. He knows the plenitude of things. He knows the oneness of the world before the separation. His is the road that leads him back to the one. He can be painted red. He can jump high over people. Can heal the sick. He's been touched by the power of thunder. He is contrary. Marriage is not his way. 126. He says, my friend is poorer than I am. He doesn't know the way to the spirits yet. Let him take her for his wife. It will be the beginning of all that is to come. 127. 4. 129. Clipping from the Rocky Mountain News. April 27, 1865. Who must die in the dark, even though he sells candles. Proverb. 131. Writes for Captain Silas Stillman Sole, Provost Marshal. Despite the several attempts already made on the life of Captain Sole, our Provost Marshal took but few precautions Sunday night as he and his charming helpmeet left the theater. When shots rang out, he started toward the sounds with wonted energy and courage. His wife was horrified to hear another shot, and found her husband lying in the street. A ball had entered through the captain's cheek, thence upward into the brain. It killed him instantly. The assassin dropped his pistol at the scene and took to his heels in a trail of blood that led in the direction of the military camps. Today in St. Paul's Church, Episcopal, The rights for one whom many called their conscience gave those Denverites a chance to show their sympathy. A veteran of Apache Canyon who went on daring danger and disorder in our cities. 132. Streets, no fear of work, fatigue, or suffering marked his character. He knew full well how many threats were levied on his life. He did his duty as he saw it. Not all have seen it his way, but few have ever seen it more steadfastly. The governor's speech. To strains of martial music played by the band of the Colorado Third, our governor spoke at length on the horror of the president's assassination, vowing the traitor fiends who have devised this act will soon be brought to reckoning. Cheers and unrestrained. 133. An interview with Colonel John Milton Chivington in the Denver Inquirer, November 30, 1868. Nothing is enough for the man for whom enough is too little. Epicurus. 135. An interview with Colonel John Milton Chivington. Synopsis of Sand Creek investigations. New revelations. The Colonel's appeal to the people of Colorado. The first installment, from our correspondent. At home among his roses, the hero of Apache Canyon bids us welcome. He's quick as a cat and 6'4", with a voice still rich and weighty with dispatch. How well he wears his nearly 50 years, unburdened by the common cares. I stand forever by Sand Creek. He testifies to us as he did to Congress and to one and all in the 4 eventful years gone by. Quickly he adds, a vast domain, gold and silver, timber, grasslands, water, patrimony of a people, this is the legacy I leave America. 136. As for controversy, as for the red man? Lo, the poor Indian. In his untutored greatness he has proved himself the best of diplomats. Though not without assistance of the high officials who plead his cause. They would make of him the subject of a great controversy. Many a villainous swindle do they perpetrate, the friends of his humanity. Enough to put to blush the awful and unparalleled commander of the sons of sin, his satanic majesty. We hear the colonel's voice echo off the oak trees, followed by a heartfelt laugh. Now would you know what people failed to comprehend through all these years of inquisition? Many things without a doubt, is the germ of our reply. The colonel cuts us short. I mean, apart from the fact the Cheyennes fired first. It's this: I am 1/8 Indian. This revelation falls on us like a thunderstone. 137. I never once denied it. Never was I asked. People simply failed to want to know. He beckons us to sit. My Indian blood. I'm proud of it and always have been. My mother's grandmother was a Mohawk. She named a son John Milton, for the poet, and the name passed down to me. Not Wachagadam or Gimisumbo as it could so easily have been, but a name with a history, a name to honor and respect. Never underestimate the power in your name, she said. If people can pronounce it, if they know it, then they can know you too. If not, you'll vanish in oblivion. 138. The watchword being candor. Colonel Chivington continues, I learned the lessons of morality in sterner times. My father raised us 80 miles from Cincinnati, deep in a hardwood forest. I learned to hew white oak and hickory into balk beams, each exactly 8 feet long and smooth as if I'd planed them. But my father, well, that was another story. At age 16 I learned to my eternal shame just what my father was, a woods pirate. He'd leave us in the morning, by evening he'd come back with box he'd snaked away from neighbors. Next year I found him drinking to unconsciousness. In my hour of decision I found but one alternative could lift me out of darkness: wondrous gospel preaching and new life benediction of the church. And speaking of conversion, you should have been with us at Sand Creek battlefield. The Cheyenne way of fighting meant the squaws could wield their rifles and their bowie knives with the same red-handed glee as braves. I saw 100 battlefield conversions that day. I mean, when my troopers saw the truth, they shot the ones who shot at them, braves and squaws and all. 139. His energy and our need for notes require a pause. He unfolds an immaculate sudarium and wipes his brow. As we dot an exclamation point, we ponder what our next inquiry should be. Surely the charges made by John and Al-Malul in the Nebraska City News must warrant a response. He folds the linen, adjusts it in his pocket, and makes deliberate reply, "I think it's best you meet the lady." Old grudges, sir, old grudges. 2 facts and 7 fabrications make 9 lies. And I'm accused unjustly. He deals a weary smile. 140. As if to prove him right, there is a rustle of silk and crinoline. The youthful mistress of the colonel's house appears. With a silvery laugh she bids us welcome to her home, she who was chosen by the living namesake of the bard who immortalized in verse that nothing lovelier can be found in woman than to study household good, and good works in her husband to promote. Then she ventures, "Sir, you see how my husband suffers from his modesty. I'll put it right. In the war, the governor named him to command because his circuit riding took him everywhere, to every niche and cover in the territory. Without authority from Washington he raised a regiment himself. And he didn't need a dollar. He issued drafts, he mustered in 2 companies and the rebels rued the day he did, at Glorieta Pass. The only way to raise a force is raise a force." The colonel cries. "People have the right to self-defense. The law is mostly a hindrance. And yet, I did go down to Washington, I found a way to crash the War Department gates, I told them Lincoln gave us his permission to raise the force already. That was an invention, then. We ask." He shrugs it off. 141. "What I said was," he said, "see my clerk there, lay the case before him. Should Secretary Stanton turn you down, just come to me and I will see that it is done." It worked. Oh, Stanton looked as though he'd bite my head off. "Have you been up there bedeviling that poor soul like everybody else?" I said, "I never went to Mr. Lincoln, other than to pay respects and shake his hand. Militias are a nuisance and a rabble." Stanton cried. But in the end, he saw it my way. By stealth and guile. We have just begun to say when Sarah cries, "Oh, you can call it guile," but Colorado agonized first, Civil War, then an Indian War, deaths and massacres, flour at $50 gold a barrel. Guile is guileless when it saves the innocent. 142. From worse than death. The colonel interrupts. "I'd rather be a private in a Negro regiment than watch the forces of rebellion raging in our streets. The specter of the late hostilities, the pyramid of cruel deaths that peaked in Father Abraham's assassination all come up before our eyes. Amen to that, we say. Nonetheless there are certain letters going around, about Sand Creek." "Are there?" He laughs. "Really? They wouldn't be the first. Written by an officer, we say, a regular." And we read the text aloud, just as it came to hand. 143. 4 years ago, I had a funeral a day for men who lost their lives by the most miserable management ever known upon a battlefield. A total of 13 from one command, besides some 40 wounded. Any officer not bent upon the rank of general or election to the Congress could take a peaceable Indian camp with a couple hundred men without 10 casualties. But I repeat, all Colonel Chivington was working for was General Straps. The camp was pacified already, no scalps were found, even the weather lacked the drama the colonel claimed. I didn't wear an overcoat and my bedding had been stolen. As for spoils, the colonel had 3 quartermasters, 3, not one of whom would tell me just how many horses he went out with or how many more came back. My guess is, 350 more. Silence. We wait to hear an answer, one direct and apposite. Sarah is the one to break the silence. Grub. The unexpected vocable is followed by a catch of breath, as if her tongue is poised to strike. 144. The colonel touches Sarah's hand and says, "It was a scandal that while my troops were fighting the Cheyennes some scoundrels shrunk to plunder. But then, conceive of what we did. We called ourselves the Colorado Indian Expedition. We marched 300 miles in 10 days' time, 100 miles when snow was 2 feet deep. The last night we did 40 miles. At daylight we attacked an entire Cheyenne camp, 130 lodges, 1,000 warriors strong plus squaws, don't forget the squaws. We killed 4 chiefs, 500 Indians, seized their stock and lost 9 killed and less than 40 wounded. We found a white man's scalp not more than 3 days old. In Denver, before we left, there had been a great display of corpses scalped and mutilated by Cheyennes, so there was not a man among us who could think the Cheyennes took that scalp in a friendly, playful manner. Or possibly those Indian saddle blankets trimmed with scalps of white women with braids and fringes of their hair were just mementos of the Cheyennes' great affection for the whites. Unless we settled this, we'd not survive to statehood. Emigration at a halt, Eastern bankers holding off their money, machinery to dig the mines just gathering rust. We were being held as hostages by Stone Age savages. 145. Fraught with superstition and bully cruelty, all dissemblers, none of them accountable, who knew no law that anyone could understand. Time is slipping by, the question must be put, how could someone 1/8 Indian fail to sympathize with Indians? Our question might be phrased with greater comedy, but the onrush of his words and our desire to know has only served to sharpen up the discord of the facts. It is the faithful Sarah who now draws near us, her dainty eyelids lowered, her graceful nostrils flared and waxen. Aha! She cries, the author's inclinations have come out at last. You have no sense of decency. You've come here just to trip us up. The Colonel takes her hand and says, my dear, keep in mind how agreeable it is, how comely, how reviving to a soul so long afflicted by this curse to know that God has given invincible might to quell the wicked of the earth and give dominion to the good, the wise, the just, they true believers. Now, peace. I'll give the man his answer. 146. He rises from his chair. He leans for emphasis, his grey eyes cold as altar marble. Surely, sir, you cannot think so little of your God. This world is delivered to our hand, sir, delivered for dominion. Our Saviour bids us make his excellence supreme. And what an excellence it is, so indispensable to progress, culture, commerce, mechanism. Think of it. You sit there, writing. Readers await your words. The nation reads, and when it acts, for our eternal good there's righteousness like incense and piety like Balmore. Nation under God, sir, under God. Oh, the Indian in war's a prodigy, in death a stoic, but he's dumb, sir, dumb as a dog, he's ignorant of what can lift him. What will save him? Offer him salvation. Offer life. As he is, he'll never read a word you're writing. I will. I am what conversion means. 147. The Wolves of Heaven. Northern Cheyenne Reservation, Montana. Morning, August 17, 1911. To want to forget something is to think of it. Proverb. 149. Troubled sleep. She thought that she'd be free of it, but no. To begin with, little dancing dreams. So small you can hear them in the cooking pot. Can see their dust rising out of a bowl of a pipe. Too small for comfort. Making her remember. The bundle. Down in its deep earth home. She can feel. They laid it there, but it's not at rest. 150. There's a distant thrumming, somewhere. Echo of an iron horse, chuffing its cinders at the stars. The noise comes louder in her ears. And voices, reaching across the air from somewhere. Somewhere, but not so far away. Praising and lamenting, on and on. Prayers as free as the breath that says them. 151. They're singing, in a camp at the bend of a creek at the edge of timber. A camp that will stay forever, staked to the earth by memory. It's the camp at Sandy Creek. Why are they singing? What is there to sing about? Once they were called the people. Sisters. Now they're out of the heat and cold forever. 152. Darkness. Is she awake? Asleep. She can hear Black Kettle's words. They're clear and bright as pebbles in a stream bed in the moonlight. The white men make two wars. One to kill us. And one to make sure no one will remember. It's the war against memory that can never be redeemed. White men, at Sandy Creek. They couldn't even say their anger. None of them spoke our language, none of us spoke theirs. What happened couldn't be spoken. 153. If there's no saying, there can be no vision, no way of knowing, nowhere to follow. A world without saying can never have a story. No beginning, no generation coming. Just killing off the living, killing off the dying. Killing to kill, without even the heat of wanting to. 154. Cold, cold is the war that kills off memory. It keeps the ones who come from finding the words, the first words, to start our story. 155. Starting the story begins today. Sisters. Remember, and resist. 156. Ekamina knows that she's been dreaming. When she wakes up, she'll go on with her story, the story of the world she's in and the world that's yet to come. She gives back her dream, and opens to her waking. 157. An interview with Colonel John Milton Chivington in the Denver Inquirer continued November 31, 1868. Chance does nothing that has not been prepared beforehand. Alexis de Tocqueville. 159. An interview with Colonel John Milton Chivington. The truth about his saddle. More revelations. At home with the hero of Apache Canyon and his bride. She takes his arm and smiles, exclaiming, "John, now is the time to show our friend your saddle." 160. The grandest gift a colonel ever had, he says, leading us under the oak trees to the house, into the parlor, where the afternoon sun illuminates a saddle bridle set that stuns our senses, the finest saddle leather, California style, capped with solid silver, with our country's coat of arms elaborately wrought in native gold, a portrait of Washington, engraved at cantle center, surmounted by a wreath of evergreens in gold, a portrait of the colonel, surrounded by a wreath of laurel, where flies our country's flag in silver and gold, astride the saddle tree, a brace of holsters decked with pairs of crossed sabers, in gold. The more we see, the more we admire the mashir, bound with gold enameled leather, the skirting corners, given to shields with solid silver eagles at their centers, wings extended, their breasts defended with shields of gold, holding in their talons wreaths of solid gold. 161. The organs of our vision labor under such munificence. Even the bridle is a treasurette, best black leather, the brow band bound and engraved with eagles bearing the stars and stripes, full spread, in gold, rosettes at the ears and shields of stars and bars, in gold, the check straps, shields, and buckles silver, ornamented with gold stars, a silver breastplate, with a second shield of stars and stripes in gold. We cannot speak magnificent would seem a sacrilege. Accoutrements like these were tribute to Spanish conquerors by Aztec kings. The gift of grateful friends, the colonel says. They know a man like me is never more at home than in a saddle. You watch a lot of life ride by up there, a lot of men who risk their lives, cowards and renegades who don't or won't, the aimless, the wiseacres, the burrs in your blanket like what's his name, S.I. Soliel Dutch in the head and pigeon in his heart. He's dead now, isn't he? Dark of the night, as I recall. A coward cut down by a coward. If I know him, he'll be leading a mutiny in hell by now. 162. Of soul we had not as yet inquired, but before we can, Sarah says, even the great John Smith caught hold of the saddle, begging the colonel to save his skin. The mountain man and traitor. The colonel interjects. I knew him at once. We were 60 yards away, the Indians in full combat, and I called out, "Over here, Uncle John. You'll be all right." For an older man he could really cut and run. I got him in between me and my troops, then I hoisted him up here. The colonel's palm rests on the pommel. The Indians fled. "Uncle John, here you are risking life and limb, making millions trading skins, and you're about to lose your own," I said. "You mountain men don't care for anything but profits." And of course he had those Cheyenne wives of his, and heaven knows how many half-breed cubs besides. Anyhow, he didn't say a word, not no, not please, not thank you. He just rode along, watching through half-closed eyes at something none of us could see. The deaths of Soul and the half-breed son of Smith are much disputed, we remind him. 163. Of Soul I've said all I'm going to say. He wouldn't take my orders, he wouldn't fire. The high officials who loved to plead the Indian cause made sure that he would be protected. Not enough to keep him alive, we venture. Or Smith. Smith was a different case, he says. There's something about a half-breed likely to excite repugnance, even venom. Indian and white, each race embraces only its own. A fact of nature, birds, and animals. But how related to the case of young Jack Smith? We interrupt. The facts are few but point clearly to his execution by the colonel's troops. It depends which way you run, now doesn't it? The colonel says. Run. We ask. Yes, run. You see your flag, you see your army, do you run to greet it like a citizen? Or run off to join the savages? I'd say which way you run will tell just what you are. 164. But the boy would have looked around and seen the slaughter of his dark-skinned brothers. How was the lad supposed to know to save himself? And unlike Soul, who was murdered in the middle of the night, young Jack was taken to a lodge in the middle of the afternoon and shot by a squad of soldiers, in earshot of his father. The colonel had it in his power to save him. The colonel might have made a very useful man of him. He was a man already, the colonel says. I don't think he would have served a useful purpose. I had no orders to receive, and no advice to give. Young Jack died accidentally, at an inspection of guns carried out by soldiers under my command. That's all. Sarah adds, your readers will do well to have this side of things, you know. Which side? We ask. 165. Our side. There comes a young woman roughly clad, of striking looks, with long red hair, something prized by savages. Her name, Lucinda Eubanks, age 22, a baby at her breast. Born in Pennsylvania, an emigrant to Kansas, she is one of thousands of pilgrims heading west across the plains in 1864 never to arrive. She is overtaken by a party of Cheyennes. First a Cheyenne chief named Two-Face kills her husband. When her baby cries and Two-Face fails to quiet it, he takes it by a foot and arm and dashes it to the ground, jumping on its head and chest. He forces her to dig its grave. No sooner done, he puts her up for sale 3,000 pounds of flour, sugar, coffee, and 20 steers for her, the beautiful redhead. Instead, a gang of 40 savages descends on Two-Face and carries her away. A moment's silence. No need for all the details, Sarah, the colonel says. Oh? Indeed. She says. Just for once I wish the unconvinced would listen. She cried, never will I be the mother of a child conceived in terror, ravished by a mob of savages. 166. Of course, I saw to it we got her back, the colonel adds. The day my troops showed up those Indians suddenly got the idea to repent. We hanged Two-Face in chains. In trace chains. This last comes nearly in a whisper. The grisly particular is barely out before Sarah adds, Lucinda Eubanks later married a physician out of gratitude for helping her avoid the fate of motherhood that she had come so much to dread. True, and touching, we reply, but a fact not suitable for readers. I warned you, she continues, you and your readers. This is the other side. The truth. 167. The point is, the Colonel says, you cannot fight for the end of slavery in the South and wink at human chattel on the plains. Poor Indians, indeed. They're completely shameless. But no, you'll tell us next that uniforms hide all plates in with gold and the sword of justice dulls. My Indian war was fought for selfish ends. Colonel Chivington, a candidate for Congress, for general straps, electioneering day and night. 4 years have passed and I succeed in one thing only, in living a private life. If you can call these interviews a private life. There's nothing for it, but to show him, his Sarah sighs. Walking to an antique chest, she opens a drawer, takes out a folded piece of tissue, and lays it in our lap. The paper holds a glossy lock of auburn hair, and under it, a note. To Sarah, who never will forget my sufferings. Signed, Lucinda. I have companionship, she says, no matter what the change of fortune brings. 168. With this, a tear has formed in the corner of her eye. What boots it at one gate to make defense, and at another to let in the foe? The Colonel says, and the conversation falters. Sunlight is fading, a sense of melancholy overcomes our intercourse. One last inquiry yet remains, and we must make it now. After the death of Soule, Lieutenant Cannon, his replacement, swore out a warrant for a man named Squires for Soule's murder. He brought him into custody. 2 days later, Cannon was dead of poisoning. Squires had escaped. Was Squires a member of the Colonel's regiment? Had the Colonel any knowledge of his whereabouts? We hear our questions dropping one by one in silence. The Colonel's eyelids droop, then close. 169. Evening shadows lengthen. After a moment, Sarah says, it pains us much to say so, but Soule was something of a coward, a drunkard, and a thief. He was in cahoots with traitors like Uncle John to profit from the Cheyennes. Who knows, to stir up war against the whites, to close the gold fields, hold us all for tribute. A man like him was capable of anything. We direct our gaze at the Colonel. His eyes are open now. So drunk he didn't know his left hand from his right, he says. And tell me, what should a field commander tolerate? He fought his best in finding reasons not to fight. Remember, sir, the President's Committee on the Conduct of the War, the committees of the Congress, all of them took no action for anything I did. But had the Colonel not resigned and mustered out before the 2 committees met? Was it not a fact that Colonel Chivington's commission actually expired September 23 of 1864, 2 months before Sand Creek? A technicality which placed the Colonel well outside the reach of military justice? 170. I have nothing more to say, he says, his eyelids closing. We know the Colonel's last official word is spoken. By the way, we say, a dispatch has come from Indian Territory south of Kansas. The 7th Cavalry attacked and burned a Cheyenne camp. Arid killed the chief, Black Kettle. 7th Cavalry. He asks, I don't recall just who commands them. A general, we reply. George Armstrong. Custer. Golden Scalp Lock. The Colonel smiles. An officer you'll be hearing more about. The younger generation takes the field. And Black Kettle dead. How nice. 171. A tone of indifference, an inconclusive handshake. This is the subdued conclusion to our interview. Turning to Sarah, we look upon a face more wan and careworn than the one we beheld when we arrived. There are lines around the eyes, the lips no longer hold the curl of playfulness that made us welcome. There is no doubt she loves the colonelny, more than loves, she tends, glorifies, displays him as the heraldry of all she worships in mankind. And much there is to glorify. A man of little schooling, without a day of military training, who traded in the pulpit for the battlefield, for many he became the counterpart of war itself. A giant in stature, a whirlwind in strife, he took his soldiers gladly where the battles raged. The rebel forces vanquished, he was honored by a grateful people. He could have lived a circuit rider's life and preached to his dying day were it not for the overwhelming cruelty of Sand Creek. 172. Farewell, we say to Sarah. And farewell to her colonel. For those of the martial disposition, Chivington will ever be the very incarnation of war and retribution. To Denver merchants Colonel Chivington is Xerxes, Alexander, Caesar, all in one. To cattlemen, the one who tipped the balance of the plains from buffalo to beef. The name of their protector to those who plumb the Rockies' depths for gold. Yet doubts and shadows linger. That the Cheyenne camp was peaceful was the finding of the Congress. The innocent were slaughtered just because they were at hand. We say this, the uniform of these United States should ever be the emblem of humanity and justice. The colonel broke the honor of that trust. He planned and put in hand a massacre so foul it would have set to shame the veriest savage of all who were the victims of his cruelty. 173. The toll of the Indian wars is not the count of bodies only. It is invisible. It attacks the mind and heart. It puts the soul to trial by asking, this nation under God, how shall it grow from roots so deeply set in wrong? And when it does, its fruit how can it prove a savor to our spirit? 175. The Wolves of Heaven. Northern Cheyenne Reservation, Montana. Afternoon, August 17, 1911. If one is moved when not stimulated by external things, it is the movement of heaven. The secret of the golden flower. 177. The people gather. Day 3 is the marriage day. Tell us all. They tell her. Tell us the beginning of all that is yet to come. But it's not yet time. Ekamina waits by the fire to start her story. 178. One of the young women is painted with her father's paint. Black suns, black moon. She takes the pipe and smokes it. She's the daughter of earth and thunder. She's pledged to one who'll be the young man, the one who found her. The daughter of earth and thunder will marry him, for all of them. 179. He's hers. She's his. She'll serve sisters now. 180. Now she's painted with her mother's paint. Green sun, green moon. New life is in her. She's spring and rain and thunder. 181. Some of the people bring 2 wolf skins. One red, one white. Red for the male, for day. White for female and the night. Wolves bring messages. They're the ones who show how to coax the shy ones out of hiding. Then they bring a fox skin, for the light of the morning star, whose rise is the call to hunt. 182. They paint the wolf and fox's skins. They fix 4 medicine wheels to the hips and shoulders, and 1 to the middle of each back. For the white wolf, a strip of buffalo fur behind her head. The tips of a pair of buffalo horns behind her ears. They're coming alive in spirit. They're coming alive in their hands. 183. Now they'll hunt over earth like heaven. 184. Bring in food. Scatter the corn. Feast on meat like the meat of the serpent the wolf man killed. Let it be meat of the youngest of dogs. Not like the wolf, yet like him. Let it be meat from his contrary, from his sacred other. Eat it, and there's food for the 4 horizons. Food for the tree of the world. And there'll be food for one and all. 185. The sun's eye closes. Ekamina's eyes are 2 weights to carry. She says, blow on the coals of the fire. Blow on the coals of the heart. Keep them alive for tomorrow. But the people cry, Ekamina, the story. 186. So she says some more of her story. The elder has said, my friend is poorer than I am. He doesn't know the way to the spirits yet. Let him take this woman for a wife. It will be the beginning of all that is yet to come. What the elder says, the younger one agrees to. So does Grandfather Wolfman. Then he shows the four horizons. He shows them animals, so many animals. Now, go to your home. He says. Go, and take our daughter with you. You, young man, are the luckiest one of all. Where she goes, everything I've shown you goes with her. That's her power, that every animal will come with her. 187. He says to his daughter, I send you out for a very special reason. These people eat only what they can snare. Just fish and songbirds. Now that you'll be with them, they'll find what earth can truly give them. Show them the game, teach them to think. To hunt. Teach them to stay warm in their skins. 188. Listen to my words, sisters. Ekamana says. Look at the game you've been given. Look, and think. Think of the hunt. Think how you stay warm in your skins. 189. It's night, and they sing songs of the wolf spirits. 191. 5. 193. The Wolves of Heaven. Northern Cheyenne Reservation, Montana. August 18, 1911. To know the world you must construct it. Cesare Pavese. 195. Frank Little Wolf isn't happy. It's the fourth day, the day when they don't eat at all. Inside the camp, around the wolf lodge, everyone must work. They pitch a second camp. Like their own, it faces toward Blue Mountain. But now the lodges are the lodges of the animals, of all the animals that daughter has ever brought them. 196. Now every person in the camp, man and woman, old and young, must find their way to one of them. How do they do it? Masters are there to show each one a way. Otters to the otter lodge, cougars to the cougar. And everyone must come to look and sound and be a creature of the daughter. 197. Now the contraries come, they set up their lodge. And the keepers of the arrows, the sacred arrows that know their way. And the wolf skins, red and white, they're stuffed with sacred grass, they're washed and limbered, combed and painted, so the ones who put them on will feel the power of the center of the world. The power of the four horizons. Of everything that goes on fours. 198. Who needs the story now? Feel it. Do it. This is the time to leave your name behind, to change yourself, get rid of your old heart. Shed your life's dead skin, leave it in the sun. 199. Ekamana laughs. All this is what they set in motion, the two of them, the ones who pledged this Massacre. But even so, Frank Little Wolf isn't happy. Ekamana says it to him, let it go. Someone else can eat, someone else can build a lodge, someone else can show the ways of all the animals. Let it go. He sits in the shade of the wolf lodge. He doesn't speak. 200. The lodges now are empty. Dogs indoors. Fires out. Everyone is watching. Waiting. As they paint the ones who'll be the wolves, as they paint the ones who are the daughter and her husband, Ekamana says some more of her story. 201. Now they're warm in their skins, and they say goodbye, old woman, grandfather wolf man, daughter, her husband, and the elder who's a shaman. Rest 4 times, my daughter, grandfather says, but travel straight to the young man's people. 202. When the 3 reach camp, they find they're followed by families of otters, by rafters of turkeys, by roots of wolves, by buffalo in herds. Animals fill the horizon. Buffalo even rub their backs against the daughter's lodge poles. They've come to offer up themselves. How they love her. 203. Listen, you. This is the way sisters won the right to hunt. To receive the gift of the lives of animals. To be the people that we are, because whatever lives will come to us, will offer up itself as long as spirits talk with us. As long as daughter does the bidding of the old ones. 204. But no one's perfect. There's the day a buffalo calf strays in, and daughter's eye goes soft with pity. This is the thing that grandfather won't hear of pity. So daughter must leave the camp. Back to the mountain lodge, back to the old ones. To grandfather and old woman. And young man, her husband, follows too. They go up the trail. They never came back again. 205. Now, you see. What once was sure no longer is. Once, the will was there. Now where's the way? 206. Find it. Find the way. For all fatigue, and footsore. Sisters find the spirit trail. 207. Frank Little Wolf gets up. He leaves the shade of the wolf lodge. He lights a pipe to bless the palings for a pound that they must build. It's a wide corral, with arms as wide and open as a crescent moon in spring. With cusps that will take in every animal of every kind. And they'll come home here, each to its very own lodge, at the center of the world. 208. Now everything is ready. Only the oldest ones alive can give the signal. They're the ones to send off Red Wolf. He runs out of camp to the calling song of the Wolf Master. Then White Wolf runs out, too. Now, you, listen. Everything is still. Down in her deep earth home. Grandmother rules. 209. Ekamina leads them back to the wolf lodge one more time. Coals are glowing in the ashes of the fire. Sweet grass burns. 210. They sing calling songs, songs to the listening spirits. And they answer. 211. The Old Gentleman on the Train. John Smith. June 8, 1871. The tigers of wrath are wiser than the horses of instruction. William Blake. 213. The heat is on, the goddamned heat is on. Trust them to know or care. A smell of hay and coal smoke streams in the window and out a door that wags half open. Kansas is closing in around him with a yawn, with busted sod and sing-song piety, with the click of wheels and bump of couplings and rattling glass, on and on, State Line, Edwardsville, Lenape, Stranger, L&L Junction, bite after bite out of the pancake of the plains. And him in a moleskin coat, damask vest, collar up to his Adam's apple, black string tie and high black shoes. He looks more like Marshall Field than a man who lived a lifetime in the wilderness. But his feet are cold. How can his feet be cold? A man who trapped and hunted all the way from Westport to the Bitterroots, now his feet are cold in these goddamned high black shoes. Deerskin, now that was something else. Warm, limber. 214. Loose shoes, tight pussy, a warm place to take a shit. 3 things that take a man away from traps and trading. 1 shot, 1 deer. 2 shots, 1 deer. 3 shots, no deer. Choke cherries, and 4 around a fire to eat them, stones and all, with a noise like horses champing corn. Roasted fat hump ribs of buffalo, sliced boiled tongue, wild plums, rose pods. Tastes and smells come thronging. For a moment there's the sharp neat smell of smoke from cottonwood fires. And then he's back again, here on the Union Pacific out of Westport to Fort Harker, a streamer of smoke behind, smudging on the horizon. And farther back, Washington, and the President of these United States, America's Napoleon, where Smith has been interpreter and shepherd for 6 Cheyenne and Arapaho chiefs who sued for peace by begging, "Give us something to show for all our lands you've taken." Followed by lies and hedging and calls for studies and commissions. 215. Also the theft of Indian lands can go on as smooth as, "Mister, the heat ain't on, it's you. Just widen up your window." It's the brakeman looking silly in his cap and badge. Puny officials, wandering through the folds of his private life like lice. 4 times he's made this journey to the White House. 3 presidents, 20 years. At first, the Indians got to talk chief talk. Now they simply beg. No greenbacks in their pockets, no land for buffalo. From Sand Creek the whites have even carted off the bones of their Cheyenne victims. Sold them to some institute. Young Jack's bones, for sure. Now they're jumbled in some crate in Washington. The government gets it all. He thinks of Jack, tall, light hair, gray eyes, no way to tell him from a white man. His daddy's boy. And yet he wasn't, he was Cheyenne, Sistas, with a youthful passion for his mother and her clan. The choice of the son who would rebel against the father. 216. And was then cut down by death. Him. White antelope. Crow woman. Cheyennes by the hundreds. Si Soul in Denver. Black Kettle and his people on the Washita. Yet somehow. Smith goes on, a wind-worn outcrop in a desert of death. In Washington they call him Indian lover. The army calls him Squaw Man. The mountain man no longer gets respect, not since Sand Creek. There's nothing now newcomers need to know. Just kill off Indians, bust up the sod, dig gold. And there's nowhere to go but forward. He nods. He can't stay awake, he can't doze off. He'd like to, but his head is lolling this way, that way. And now it's cold. 217. He's setting traps along the Prairie. Lots of beaver here. The others think the creek was cleared, but he knows better. Or thinks he knows till 10 Arapahoes come screech and howling onto him and there's nothing for it but to cache himself and let them take his animals, tools, grub, and blanket roll. What's left to eat is parflesh and a rawhide lariat, and to drink, some Taos gut warmer. He thinks, there's not much choice now, you'll really have to stir your stumps. He opens up the Taos and swizzles some, then he hears a flute. A flute. Not an Indian flute, but something with a wolfish turn to it. He looks around. The buffalo grass is singed, the rocks along the creek scorched and crusted black. There are 2 big lizards there. No, 2. 218. Somethings, standing straight, propped up by their tails and dressed in Navajo red, brass buttons, white piping on their vests. And grinning. We've expected you, one says. For years and years. The other says, and they bow. He reaches for his scalp knife but they go on grinning, saying good morning, sir. Shortcut to the mountains. As if standing at the entrance to some swank hotel. One of them does a capriole and sings oh, do. While the other claps his hands. Suddenly, Smith is laughing. Look. Look there. They cry, and gambol up beside him, pointing at the creek bank. It's an entrance, there's a keystone arch, there's a light down under shining up at them, and they're tugging at his sleeves and dancing all around him crying shortcut. 219. So he walks inside and he hasn't gone 200 yards before he comes out in a canyon where he can run his hand on rock walls smooth as beaver plu. The ground is soft with cedar chips. And quiet. Overhead the boughs of fir trees weave a soughing roof. The light is going, but there are points still shining out of tiny holes in the rock around him. Then he meets a dead wall, solid black. He jerks his head around and sees another wall grown up behind him. That's it? He thinks, this time you'll lose your hair for sure. And he's angry yet not angry, certain that his time has come. And with that, the darkness opens up. It's a room as bright as day, and something like he can't quite decide just what it's like, but there's something. 220. The company is waiting, he hears. His pockets suddenly are emptied, his knife and purse and bottle gone. They picked me clean. He thinks, and hears a voice, "Mr. Smith, formerly a tailor's apprentice of Lexington, Kentucky. A mountain man, and now our visitor." He hears the sounds of jollity and there's a crowd of people all around him saying, "Hush." "Why, here's the mountain man." He feels his hair frizz out like a molting buffalo. "How do you do, dear Mr. Smith?" It's a grand old gentleman in black, with bright gold spectacles, and he's pulling out a notebook. "I've been watching you make your way up there, and hoped that we might talk down here." He claps his hands and the redcoat lizards bring up chairs and a box of fat Havanas. 221. Better than a pipe. He finds himself saying as he reaches out for one. "Take several, Mr. Smith." The grand old gentleman insists, taking for himself. Then he reaches out his finger to the end of Smith's cigar and touches it. The smoke springs up as if he'd torched it with a living coal and Smith can feel his feet go cold. He says, "The devil." "The same." The grand old gentleman replies, taking up a comb of pearl and tortoise shell to dress his beard. "How?" Smith begins to ask, but the old gentleman laughs. "Evil communications corrupt good manners, sir." "You mean, you really are?" Smith asks. "Of course." The old gentleman combs his beard. Now Smith feels he's known this man, but where? He feels his hands rise up to offer his cigar to sky and earth sistis style. "Now that's not very nice," the old gentleman objects. He's staring at the cigar. "Smith, I beg you. Out upon such superstitions." 222. We cut a Christian figure here. It's a tribute of sorts, don't you see? Smith doesn't see and he wants his knife back. "No use in that, sir," the old gentleman continues. "And alas for your old habits. You cannot kill the dead. Ah, I see your equilibrium has been destroyed. Believe me, I did not intend it. Come. Open up that door for us." He gestures at a bright brass doorknob Smith just now has noticed. "Oh no," Smith thinks, "you won't get me that way." Then he remembers, there's nowhere to go but forward, so he grasps and turns and a door swings open noiselessly. "Good hinges," Smith blurts out, and brings a smile to the grand old gentleman, who says, "Oh, we have the raw materials and time." As they step into a great salon, high ceiling, chandeliers, portraits on the walls, carpets underfoot, table in the middle, a bottle, a pair of glasses. Smith is sure he's been here, a familiar feeling has him by the neck but his tongue keeps hanging loose. "Just call me Brother Bender," says the grand old gentleman. He pours 2 glasses. Smith asks, "Did you say Brother Bender? Don't tell me you're a preacher." One of the Hallelujah boys with eyeballs white as a mule on a mountain trail in winter. 223. Brother Bender laughs. "I could have been. Here's to you." Smith empties his glass. The taste is nothing like the dis, it's warm and smooth, and he feels a need for talking taking hold of his tongue. Brother Bender says, "Oh yes, I could have been the kind that does up 2 long sermons of a Sunday, then plays nickel ante poker with the deacons all night long for the takings bagged and counted. And when he gets in debt, makes meat of his congregation for all the poor heathens out in Timbuktu dying for want of a gospel preacher, condemned to eternal hell because they'll only part with noisy dimes and nickels, not the silent grace of greenbacks." 224. Smith says, "I ain't been overly good since I came to the mountains. Don't look to me for pity. That's just the way the stick floats." "Of course," replies his host. "The world is why, it's just the world. Yet it's given for our dominion. Can you imagine giving a world that's dark for half the time and twilight half the other half? Some gift. How can you rule what you can't even see?" The question tickles Smith. He's never thought of it like that. It reminds him of S.I. Soul. "I've been in on every Indian treaty on the plains." Translator, English to Cheyenne and back again. Speaker to the House of the Deaf on one side, and the mute, on the other. Brother Bender laughs. "You're a man of spirit," he cries. "Spirit?" Smith asks. And then strangely, he feels his heart begin to break. Why should it go to pieces while his host is laughing? It's the image in his mind again. The end of the road of the treaties and palaver and pipes and gifts. 225. The massacre at Sand Creek, the mob of 100 Dazers milling around his son, calling him son of a bitch that should have been shot long since. And Jack, with his grey eyes cold with hate and anger, shouting that he didn't give a damn. If they wanted so bad to kill him, shoot him. And the 100 Dazers raging how they'd kill his father and anybody else that loved the Indians, when Colonel Chivington had called, "Come out, Uncle John. Come on out of there." Jack's eyes had turned on him and staked him to the spot. Never before, never since, has Smith had someone stare directly through his flesh into the passageways where his deepest feelings nest. In that instant Smith had seen a cave inside himself, a cave whose walls were covered with delicate meticulous inscrutable tracings. No one, not Jack, not he, would ever know their meaning. What he knew was what he'd heard. The Colonel's voice, as cold as stone. 226. He'd turned away and gone outside. A pistol shot rang out, and Jack was dead. But not dead enough. That was when the whoops and yells began, and 100 Dazer got his mount, tied Jack's feet together, and dragged him out of camp and back and forth across the prairie. Others rode to join him, whooping, yelling, and for what? Who was the hero? What had been the prize? The deaf exulted, the mute were dead. "What I meant was these know too much," says Brother Bender. "That's why I've had my eye on you," pouring him another drink. But Smith is raking up the coals of his feelings yet. He doesn't believe, not in Brother Bender, not in chit-chat, not in anything but his vision of those tracings deep inside. He'll carry it to his grave, knowing it was he who turned his back on his own boy. He alone, and no one else. 227. And here's the place it's taken him, hell, and a go-round with its master, who might as well have been the president's private secretary. Was, in fact, a double for the man. That is what Smith has been groping for, the model of that master flatterer, magician of contracts and procurements, maker of sutlers and Indian agents, Midas, king of the government dirt that he can turn to gold. That scene, now Smith begins to see familiar whiskers in these portraits on the walls. It's a gallery of sharp-set rogues, Republicans and Democrats, ready to peel the Indian off the surface of the earth. "No more," Smith says, pushing his glass away, "and thank you for your kindness. It's time I broke for timber." "Which way to the mountains?" "Why, sir, you've had a change of heart?" the other asks. "May I know why? Was there something lacking in my course of conduct?" "Come, sir, never fear to speak your mind." "I spoke my mind." Smith says, "I spoke it 6 ways round and then some." 228. Out of the way life. Case-hardened habits. A pity. I can tell you're well disposed to higher things. Not long ago the court of a reigning king was horrified by an envoy of your president who dealt out cards while licking thumb and finger, but for that, he might have been thought a merchant prince. Smith turns away. His heart is now too heavy for this talk he's heard before. In the White House. "I'm off," he says, turning to find the door and go. Brother Bender says, "I'll see you out." His tone is all regret and "beg your pardon." This time, when they go out through the noiseless door, they're in a corridor, or is it a cave? Smith can't tell which. It's dark. Doors are slamming. There are shouts, and clangs of iron on iron. It's damp. Brother Bender holds a candle. Grease is running down its block. Its blaze clings to the wick as if it hates to leave it, then gives itself to smoke as if in mourning. 229. It's cold again. Smith can hear the echo of their footsteps, and a chill begins to take him. He needs a drink. He needs it bad. Just then the flame flares up and he's blinded by the light. He rubs his eyes and sees a spotted python coming at him with its reddened yellow eyes and thin white fangs and a tongue that's sharp and quick as a panther's paw. Fire blazes out of niches in the walls. The lizards have come back with willow lances, they thrust them at his legs and ankles. And Smith begins to hear a wispy hiss coming from them, drawn out and given breath until he hears it: Smith, Smith. Now he's straining every joint and muscle, and fear has put the taste of gunmetal in his mouth. Shrieks have started up behind him. It's as if the whole caballada of hell has broken loose. The stench of burning sulfur stings his lungs. This place is not quite full, Smith thinks. Not quite, and I'm the hottest on their list. 230. He turns his head. The face of Brother Bender hangs there, next to his. Serene. Gray eyes staring into his. Smith hadn't seen, but yes, they're gray. And cold. They're Jack's. He can feel the heat from the fires behind him, they're at his shoulders now and something's reaching out, it comes around his arms. It's the python, its coils are winding one upon another. Smith can see the spots flexing closer to his eyes, blurring into whirls and mazy patterns, and suddenly they're a wall, a coiling living wall, covered with delicate meticulous inscrutable tracings. There, before his eyes, he's falling into himself, into warmth and into blackness, with a long and wolfish yell ringing in his ears and a burning smell and thirst as his feet begin to fail him, begin to drag him downward into darkness, into a seething formless magma that is no river, no way to anywhere but. 231. He's awake. It's not the Purtori he's on the train from Westport to Fort Harker. The window's hanging open, he's sweating in his socks, he's looking into the eyes of a brakeman chanting, "You all right?" And Smith must raise his aching head to nod in answer. The brakeman gives a loud opinion, "You're sick, old scout. Close her up," and bangs the window shut. Smith can feel the prickle of the eyes around him. "Shit, I cried out in my sleep," he thinks, and holds his head up, eyes straight ahead. Indifferent. Resolute. Nowhere to go but forward. 232. And the train keeps plunging on, click after clack, switch after siding, cattle pen and telegraph pole, one upon another, the tracks like iron arteries pumping people, wagons, horses, guns, priests and politicians, gazettes and gamblers into the waiting body of the land that he once tracked and trapped in, innocent as an angel. And free as an eagle, owned only by the heirs that bore him, nothing else. Nothing else. Smith wipes his face. He knows he's sick with fever, all he wants to do is get there, Darlington Agency, where his Cheyenne wife is waiting. Get into his blankets, go to sleep by the fire. After Washington, they'd hauled the delegation up to New York City. Took them to the port, where ships nosed in from Bremerhaven, Bristol, Bergen. 233. Where lines of immigrants came snaking through the customs, where there were heaps of trunks and wailing kids and railroad cars backed up to take them on, smoke hanging everywhere, the coughing of the engines like the beating of a heart that pushed it on, all of it, ship after ship, line after line, train after train. The president's man had said, "You see these white men coming from the sea? They come and come. The sea has ships without number, these men must find new homes. They need the land." At first the chiefs had watched in terror. Then it slowly dawned on them just what that mighty ocean brought ashore. And would bring ashore like this forever. Smith could see the muscles in their necks begin to slacken, their eyes grow dull. They had just walked off the edge of their world and found another that was juggernaut to everything they loved and hoped. It came from the sea, from a place not one of them had dreamed of. In a moment the plains had disappeared, the buffalo. 234. The life that was as close to them as skin. Smith's skin is burning. There's a force at work in his life too, one he's never had his way with. "Oh my son." The words come at him, cut him like the python's fangs, and he feels there's something going out of him like blood and he can't stop it. Smith settles in his seat, closes his eyes. And then he sees again those riddle tracings. Now he's opening up the volume of a life he's never lived, written in some language where the letters look exactly like those tracings. If he could only. 235. The Wolves of Heaven. Northern Cheyenne Reservation, Montana. August 19, 1911. Man does not possess freedom as a property, it is the contrary that is true. Martin Heidegger. 237. The last day, the best of all. They're up with the morning star. With the spirits, with the fox who is graceful and intricate. And the people, all of them dressed in skins. They've become the animals. 238. You hear so many flutes. You smell the sweetness of sage. The medicine lance appears. Such running and prayers and shouting. 239. It's a commoner who puts on a wolf skin now. She stands at a cusp of the crescent. She's the one who calls the animals in. Listen, you. To hunt truly is to call the animals, not to chase them. Just see what her call can do. 240. Buffalo. Elk. Antelope. Deer. Otter. Wolf. Turkey and crane. Badger, coyote. Grizzly bear, cougar, black bear, eagle. They come jumping and dancing and running, come into the arms of the crescent, spitting and crying and creeping and whining. They keep on coming and coming. 241. The contraries burst from their lodge with skybows and arrows. They're not like hunters, yet like them. They know the spirits. They are our others. 242. Animals are staggering. Falling. They bleed and they bellow when they try to get up again. Bring up the sick, bring up the ones who need blessings. Heal with this power. 243. 4 times they run this hunt. They run it past the Red Wolf Lodge, right in the heart of the Blue Sky Lodge, in the presence of the 4 inside of the 7, in the power that's given by Maho. 244. At last, all of them stand in the great enclosure. Not one will go back to a lodge. The sacred pipe, the medicine lance, the buffalo skull. Ekamana holds them up, to show their power. 245. All of a sudden Coyote comes. He runs, he feints, he dodges around. He shows how well his wiles can serve the sacred wolf, his master. 246. Then Fox leaps up. He grabs the meat from the medicine lance. Contraries catch him, snatch it back and throw out bits and pieces to the people. 247. Coyote cuts loose again. He leads them all out of the great corral, out of the crescent moon and down toward water. On the way they stop 4 times. All of them sing the Masam song. 248. You, race to the river. Fill your mouth with water. Wash. Give water to a woman. Laugh. Brush the dust away from your eyes with sage. 249. Ekamana, Frank Little Wolf, and the oldest one alive, they're in the Wolf Lodge now. They're smoking the sacred pipe. Wherever ashes fall, they fall on Tsista's ground. 250. The ashes are brushed away. The sand paintings, they're brushed away as well. The pipe, the feathers, skins, and rattles have to go. 251. Only the tree and lodgepoles stay. They can be a home for spirits, now. They can rest.